Chapter 55, The Big Apple and London Bridge. It was the afternoon of Christmas by the time Ethan finally finished dealing with the Rosalyn Dyer situation. He was currently back in his Los Angeles safe house, a place where he spent whatever time he could carve out of his tight schedule. He had begun browsing for furniture and had even researched a new design for an outdoor fire pit. He was excited to express his creativity, a luxury he never possessed in his previous life. Back then, both his apartment building and the orphanage had maintained strict regulations against altering any part of the interior or exterior. Ethan lay down on the living room sofa, mentally retracing the day's events. He had left Rosalyn Dyer alive for now. A part of him felt he should have simply finished the job and been done with it. But then Tora's words came back to him. While performing the memory extraction spell, Tora had also surfaced Dyer's recent medical records and the grim reality of her diagnosis: second-stage ovarian cancer. Now, early stage 1 or 2 ovarian cancer is often curable, with success rates reaching up to 90% for cases confined to the ovaries, which was true in Dyer's case. Furthermore, the state of California is constitutionally required to provide necessary medical care, including cancer treatment, to prisoners, covering all associated medical bills. Incarcerated individuals have a right to health care, and the correctional system is responsible for the costs of treatment. That made him realize exactly what Rosalyn wanted. She wanted him to cure her. She didn't want to take the chance with standard medicine, even though the odds were overwhelmingly in her favor. She had orchestrated the murder of one person and the kidnapping of another without even giving standard medicine a chance. She wanted his attention, and now she had it. Ethan had a specific plan for Rosalyn Dyer, but that plan would have to be enacted once she was back in Chowchilla. Dyer was a narcissist who craved attention as desperately as an addict craves their drug of choice. By refusing to even acknowledge her existence, Ethan was depriving her of her most fundamental need. Ethan stood up abruptly and glanced at the living room clock, 12:34 p.m. Miss Andler had called him the other day, asking if he could show his face at the orphanage for Christmas Eve. Originally, he had planned to spend the holiday with Wong, discussing the new book of Olestro that the sorcerers had managed to uncover from an abandoned valley in northeast India, perhaps over bowls of boiling hot soup dumplings. As for why he wasn't spending the holiday with someone of opposite gender, he had tried dating in the past. Guinevere, the girl he saw right after the Battle of New York, had lasted the longest. They made it 3 months before his constant absence on exorcism missions became too much, and she broke it off, stating he was too closed off for a relationship. Maybe Guinevere would have understood if he had told her what he was actually doing during his time away, exorcising curses, but he had not. After the breakup, he had only gone out twice. He wasn't someone comfortable with a playboy lifestyle. It had become significantly more difficult knowing that every woman he spent time with could become a potential target for people or curses wishing him harm. But he couldn't live that way forever. Perhaps that was the real reason he always kept them at arm's length. Ethan glanced toward the concrete wall and began walking toward it as Tora's arms emerged from his shadow, transmuting a heavy brown wool trench coat over his shoulders. Simultaneously, he opened a shimmering sling ring portal in his path. Stepping through, Ethan Park found himself back in the Big Apple. He looked up at the midday sky. Snow was already blanketing the city. As the portal sparked and closed behind him, nearby pedestrians immediately reached for their phones to start recording the elusive Avenger. Ethan gave a sharp side-eye to a man filming him and projected his voice through the mental link. "Tora, next time, open the damn portal in a dark alley." In response, Tora let out a mental sigh. "You need to get used to the attention, Ethan. The lengths you go to avoid social interaction are becoming mentally unhealthy." "Huh. I must be hearing things. Is the ancient tiger actually preaching to me about mental health?" Ethan replied, eyebrows raised as he approached the entrance of the orphanage. "A strong warrior must be both mentally and physically resilient," Tora proclaimed. That made Ethan pause. "Fair point, I guess." As he crossed the threshold, he was greeted by the sight of children of all ages in the yard, bustling with Christmas preparations. The main group was busy with the towering Christmas tree, while others focused on the sidewall decorations. One particularly ambitious group was even constructing a giant snowman. "Howdy, kids!" Ethan shouted to get their attention. At first, only one child turned, then two, until suddenly Ethan was swamped by children on all sides, each group trying to pull him toward their specific project. "Stop! Get back to your work," Miss Andler's voice rang out from the back. She had just arrived and took a few seconds to admire the comedic sight of Ethan being pulled in opposite directions before intervening. This was far from Ethan's first visit. He stopped by this orphanage whenever he was in New York, which had been frequent since the Chitauri invasion. The invasion itself might have ended, but the lingering fear it produced far exceeded any other trauma by a massive margin. Ethan had already exorcised and absorbed 2 special grade curses born from the fear of outer space, not to mention the countless grade 1 to grade 3 curses that had manifested globally following the attack. Even the New Mexico outbreak this past summer was a direct byproduct of the terror seeded in New York. As the various groups returned to the tasks at hand, Miss Andler approached Ethan. "You actually came," she exhaled, her relief evident. "Of course I did," Ethan replied with a warm smile. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping as if sharing a whispered secret. "And Santa gave me a lot of gifts to bring here, too." Andler looked at him, then glanced behind him. Realizing there were no bags or vehicles in sight, her eyes dropped to his feet, specifically to the dark, shifting shadow pooled there. She made a face that suggested a flicker of mild disgust. "What's with the face?" Ethan asked, sounding a little confused. "Are you sure it's sanitary to keep things in there?" Andler asked, her tone deeply skeptical. "Why wouldn't it be? I keep things I eat in my shadow all the time," Ethan replied without thinking. He caught her expression and immediately winced. "Okay, that came out wrong. I don't keep edible things in there for too long." "Let's just head inside," Andler told him, shaking her head. She turned toward the busy yard and raised her voice. "Children, lunch is in 10 minutes. 5 days later, December 31st, 2013. Rosalyn Dyer. She was bored. It had been 5 days since Christmas, 5 days since Ethan Park had arrived at the Mid-Wilshire police station and departed without ever seeking her out. Did he truly not care for the kidnapped women? Rosalind wondered, but something felt different. No one had returned to her cell to beg for her assistance. The police were incompetent. Despite the trail of breadcrumbs she had instructed Caleb to leave behind, they were likely still fumbling through their investigation. Caleb Wright had been a reliable pawn thus far. Perhaps he had simply encountered unforeseen complications. From what she had personally observed at the station, the LAPD was utilizing every resource at their disposal to locate him. She also knew it was only a matter of time before the federal agencies intervened. Rosalind had been transferred back to Chowchilla though to a new cell as a precaution, and she was left without books to pass the time. She was growing impatient, feeling the sudden, familiar urge to kill again. She studied the youthful face of her new guard. What kind of expression would he wear once she severed his hands and legs? She closed her eyes, reminiscing about her past murders, focusing on the fear and dread that clouded her victims' faces as she slowly removed their limbs, piece by piece. They were always alive, paralyzed, only able to moan as tears tracked down their faces. It was glorious. Rosalind's head snapped to attention as her sharp hearing caught footsteps approaching her cell. She smiled when she saw it was Nick. He was always so predictable. But why was he smiling? It was unsettling. "Nick, having a good day?" she fished, searching for a crack in his armor. "A great couple of days, actually," the detective replied. "I told you at the station that catching you was worth missing my wife's deathbed. After these last few days, I'm certain she would have understood." "It seems you have finally made peace with your demons," she observed. This was no fun. A settled mind was harder to break. "I did. Though, unfortunately for you, poor Caleb did not." She stilled, raising her eyes to meet Nick's. She saw an expression she had never before seen on his face, pure satisfaction. Had Caleb failed? Or was this merely a fishing expedition? She remained motionless, her gaze trained on Armstrong. "You lost, Rosalind," he stated. "We found Caleb. And though he was dead, the boy sang like a canary. You see, he kept meticulous notes on everything you instructed him to do, including the location of the last gravesite and all the bodies." Rosalind remained frozen, dissecting his expression. He wasn't lying. "Oops, clumsy me." Armstrong accidentally dropped a full-page photo of Caleb. She saw his bloodied face and his abdomen impaled by a metal pole. He looked terrified in his final moments. "That's disappointing," she replied coolly. "What happened?" "I'm not telling you," Armstrong countered. She wanted to lash out at his smug smile. "You are finished, Rosalind." You'll never leave this cell again. No more deals from the DA. You have nothing left and you'll be gone within a month's time. I know your secret, she hissed, pushing herself up to stand against the cold metal bars. I don't care. No one will listen to you, it's just the last desperate act of a disgruntled serial killer. As Nick turned his back and exited the cell block, Rosalyn flinched. She had to know what had happened. The control she craved was slipping through her fingers. That night she imagined every possible variable that could have led to Caleb being dead in such a fashion, and the only answer she could come up with is that the only way this scenario could have occurred was if Ethan Park had orchestrated it. But if Ethan had, why was she still? She didn't finish her thought when she heard it. A tune? Someone was playing music? The song had a certain pull to it. She snapped out of her trance and focused. Something wasn't right. Why was everyone so quiet? Normally, Chowchilla was a hub of noise. Even at night, the cacophony never truly stopped. This was especially true for her, as she possessed hearing far advanced than that of an average human. She shook her head, narrowing her focus to the lyrics being played. London Bridge is falling down. Falling down, falling down. London Bridge is falling down. Myfairlady. As the final octave of the song faded, she heard the distinct click of her cell door unlocking. She took a cautious step back, peering outward. The young guard who had been stationed directly in front of her cell lay unconscious on the floor. Rosalyn didn't understand what was happening, but she pushed the door open and stepped toward the fallen guard, only to hear the melody begin again. Her sharp ears picked up nothing but that song. It was as if the entirety of Chowchilla had suddenly fallen asleep. She followed the melody almost unconsciously until she reached a closed hallway, where the security doors of the facility unlocked automatically to grant her passage. In no time she found herself in the facility's lunchroom. There she saw him. The man possessed a sharp, somewhat handsome face, accented by a distinctive thin mustache and a small soul patch. His hair was a messy silver-white color, falling over his forehead in long bangs, a shade she realized was not the result of age. He was dressed in a high-collared, blood-red and deep purple Victorian suit, layered under a long, tattered trench coat with a fur-lined collar. A classic black top hat rested on his head. He also wore white gloves and a monocle over his right eye, and a small pocket watch hung from his person. His most striking feature, however, was his right eye, which glowed with an eerie red light. The man continued singing, and as the song drew to its conclusion, his head snapped suddenly in Rosalyn's direction. Myfairlady, he finished with a flourish. Chapter 56. The Wounded Man. The imaginary vengeful cursed spirit Jack the Ripper was born from the collective terror of 1888 London. He is the literal manifestation of the Great Unknown. Unlike special grade spirits born from specific concepts, this entity is fueled by the Victorian public's visceral fear of the monster in the fog, a predator who could be anyone, anywhere, at any time. A cursed spirit being the incarnation of the most notorious serial killer of the Victorian era wasn't unusual. After all, incarnated special grades are the most common among their class. And as Ethan says, every culture harbors its own curses. Normally, cursed spirits linger near their birthplaces, driven by instinct. However, highly sentient special grades, like Mojito, Jogo, or, in this case, Jack, can consciously override their instinct to stay, choosing to seek out new territory. Jack was originally exorcised in May 1889 by the Ancient One. Having decided to abandon his Victorian roots for a new playground, he terrorized Johnstown, Pennsylvania from January to May of that same year. This culminated in a devastating final battle against the Ancient One on May 31, which resulted in the collapse of the South Fork Dam, causing the loss of over 2,000 lives in collateral damage. After the Battle of New York, the general collective negative emotions regarding the unknown skyrocketed, while only a small fraction of the population felt this. It was enough to catalyze Jack's rebirth into the physical world in early 2013. That this version of Jack the Ripper was canonically weaker than during the height of his power in 1889, when he fought the Ancient One, though they shared the same curse technique. Ethan Park was the one who exorcised him this time, but rather than letting the spirit dissipate into the afterlife, P utilized cursed spirit manipulation to absorb the creature. Ethan found it poetic that Rosalyn Dyer, the most infamous serial killers of the modern day, would meet her end at the hands of the incarnation of history's most infamous serial killer, Jack the Ripper. Rosalyn and Jack locked eyes until a teacup materialized on the table in front of him. Jack picked up the cup with elegant precision and began to sip slowly. Rosalyn circled him, drifting toward the kitchen counter where the sharp utensils were kept. "What are you doing?" she asked in a crisp, high-pitched British voice. Jack replied coolly, "It's tea time, dear. I am pouring myself a cup." Rosalyn reached for a pointed metal knife, the kind used to pierce meat, and slid it behind her back. Jack gave her a side eye. "As I gathered, a brutish termagant like you may not know this, but violence while tea is being served is considered quite rude. Would you care for a cup yourself?" Rosalyn stiffened. She scanned the empty lunchroom, then made her way to the table opposite Jack and sat down. "What happened to the guards? How are you doing this? Some kind of neuroleptic agent? Sleeping gas?" If it were sleeping gas, she wondered, why was she the only one still awake? "How ungentlemanly of me, I haven't introduced myself." "My name is Jack," he declared, standing abruptly to offer a short, mocking bow. "And the guards in this facility are simply asleep. When they wake, they will have hazy memories, at least that is what my tiger friend says." Jack replied and then leaned forward, whispering as if sharing a grand secret. "But between you and me, I don't think he likes me very much." "Oh, I am getting off topic again. So tell me, are you the little serial killer who is to be my next partner?" "Is he high?" Rosalyn thought as she listened to the strange figure's monologue. Jack shook off his manic energy and started walking toward Rosalyn. As he reached her, he dropped to one knee and offered his hand, as if asking for a dance. Rosalyn didn't reply. Instead, she shifted her weight, searching for a better angle to strike. "Oh well," Jack exclaimed with a theatrical sigh. "Asking out a lady was never my strong suit." Suddenly, Rosalyn felt the air leave her lungs. A few seconds passed before she could focus, and she realized what had happened. Her feet were dangling. She had been lifted off the ground by her throat. Jack's grip was inhumanly strong. Rosalyn didn't hesitate. She brought the metal knife down with all the strength she could muster, driving it into Jack's right eye. A smirk broke across Rosalyn's face. "Take that, you son of a bitch," but then the knife slipped from his ruined socket. The eye burned a brighter, hellish shade of red, and he tightened his grip. "Don't worry. I am just going to take a quick look at your heart. Ah, what a gorgeous color one's heart turns into when they fear for their life." The incarnated Jack the Ripper possessed a unique supernatural ocular ability called the soul eye. Through his right eye, he perceived the emotions of others as distinct colors, a superior form of synesthesia that allowed him to read a person's true intentions and the specific, chilling color of fear. At the moment of death. As Rosalyn neared unconsciousness, Jack released her. She fell to the floor, clutching her throat and gasping for air. "Don't worry, you aren't going to die that soon. I have you for the whole night," Jack said, producing a long, serrated knife. "My superior was very upset with you, so I assume he would want you to suffer. I hope he likes my art. I have been doing some reading on the wounded man." To Rosalyn, the knife seemed to glow under the partial moonlight filtering through the windows. She scrambled to her feet, stumbled, fell, and forced herself up again, sprinting toward the exit with every ounce of strength she possessed. Jack simply started walking behind her, his hands swaying casually at his sides. The next morning, the sheriff discovered Rosalyn Dyer's body in the facility's lunchroom. Her corpse was positioned upright and splayed out to meticulously mimic a 16th-century medical illustration of the Wound Man. The Wound Man is a 16th-century surgical illustration depicting a human figure covered in diverse injuries, stabs, slashes, bites, and ailments, used as a medical mnemonic to navigate textbooks. One could conclude that a surgeon in 19th-century London would be quite familiar with the diagram. Indeed, many authorities and the general public at the time suspected such a background defined the profession of Jack the Ripper. Rather than merely inflicting trauma, Jack had inserted various medical and household objects into her flesh. These included an assortment of scalpels, scissors, and his signature Liston amputation knife, each carefully placed to correspond with the specific anatomical points depicted in traditional wound man diagrams. The scene was eerily clean. Jack had utilized his surgical expertise to ensure Rosalyn remained alive as the display began, resulting in a tableau that appeared more like a morbid art installation than a chaotic struggle. Chapter.
Look. If you've actually made it this far into the video and you're still here, come on then, hit subscribe. And honestly, if you think a friend of yours would like this, go on and share it with them. It really helps out. Right, I'm done. I'll get out of your hair now so you can get back to the good stuff. But seriously, stick around till the end. It's well worth it.
57. A train heist and trump card. Phil Coulson. This was all his fault. Phil thought as he looked at his bloody hands, then back at the bleeding Sky. She had been shot through the abdomen and was barely clinging to life. They were currently on the bus. Phil's expression was solemn, but it suddenly shifted to a look of desperate urgency. He rushed toward his office on the upper floor of the aircraft, frantically rifling through his top drawer until he found an antique wooden box. His eyes shimmered with a newfound flickering hope, but to understand how they reached this point, one must go back several hours. 6 hours earlier. Agent Coulson stood in the main cabin of the bus, a highly modified Boeing C-17 Globemaster III that served as S.H.I.E.L.D.'s mobile headquarters. He was surrounded by his specialized team, Sky, their brilliant computer hacker and intelligence specialist, Melinda May, their reluctant pilot, though more famously known as the Cavalry. Fitzsimmons, the inseparable scientific duo of Leo Fitz and Gemma Simmons, Grant Ward, their stoic operations specialist. Standing before a massive computer screen in the lounge, Phil laid out their intelligence on Ian Quinn. Quinn was a billionaire philanthropist primarily known for his obsessive acquisition of gravitonium. Operating out of Malta, he used his vast wealth to evade international law and S.H.I.E.L.D. oversight. He had previously kidnapped Dr. Franklin Hall to force him to build a gravity field generator, a plan S.H.I.E.L.D. had barely managed to foil. He had received intel from his old friend Russo, an Italian intelligence officer, that Quinn was transporting a mysterious cybertech package via a train through the Italian countryside. Cybertech was directly linked to the enigmatic figure they had been hunting, the Clairvoyant, a person who seemed to possess knowledge of their every move. Coulson decided that if they were to intercept the transport, they would all need to go undercover. On the mission, May and Ward secured a room on the train. Ward commented on how driven Coulson and Sky had seemed lately, until May dropped a bombshell. She had informed Coulson about their relationship, their casual, intense sexual partnership. Before he could react, she donned her infrared goggles and climbed out the window of the high-speed moving train. Elsewhere, Sky and Fitz posed as a couple, swiping the ticket-taker's keys to set up their tech in the luggage compartment. Meanwhile, Coulson and Simmons played the roles of a father and daughter. "I'm getting into character," Simmons insisted. "My undercover persona harbors some residual resentment toward her absent American father." Her performance was so authentic that passengers across the cabin began listening in. Having thoroughly prepared, Simmons threw a pretend fit, allowing her to accidentally toss fake ashes of her mother onto the security detail to distract them. She succeeded perfectly. May tracked the target from atop the train, using her goggles to locate the package in a dining compartment. Soon, however, Coulson realized communications were down. He traveled to the rear car only to find it empty. Ward followed shortly after, having been compromised by the security force. They were chased off the train just before the guards lobbed a grenade, one that caused the entire train to seemingly vanish into thin air. Minutes earlier, Ward had dressed as a conductor to locate the package, only to be intercepted by two security agents working for Quinn who were anticipating his arrival. Ward retreated through the car to warn Coulson, and both men were forced to jump off the train once more. The pair wondered what had caused the train to disappear. The discovery of May's goggles alerted them that she, too, had been forced off the tracks. Before they could investigate further, arriving security forces chased them into a nearby vineyard. Coulson and Ward eventually stumbled upon a small vehicle that had already been hot-wired, most likely by Melinda herself in anticipation of their arrival, and they drove it back to the plane to regroup. Coulson reached out to his Italian police contact Russo, who informed him that his men had been slaughtered, warning that Cybertech was responsible for the massacre. Meanwhile, he and Ward fumbled their way through the hollow-table technology to analyze the grenade, all while debating May's earlier revelation regarding her relationship with Ward. Coulson strictly informed Ward that fraternization on his bus was against protocol. He made it clear that if it interfered with the mission, Ward would be transferred to Antarctica. Just then, Russo arrived at the plane, only for May to appear from behind and lethally stab him. Flashing back to the events on the train, May had been following the package from the rooftop when she was targeted by enemy agents. Forced to deploy her parachute, she fled the train and soon came across Coulson and Ward. They were frozen in the exact positions they had landed in after jumping, apparently paralyzed by the unique effects of the grenade. May eventually located a vehicle and hot-wired it, but she was captured by Russo and his men before she could escape. Russo, as it turned out, was a traitor. The men took May to a villa where they tortured her for Coulson and Ward's location. Russo openly admitted to taking bribes from Cybertech. However, he made a fatal mistake. He underestimated her. If it's only pain, then the cavalry will not stop. When Russo stabbed her in the shoulder and turned his back, May used the very knife still lodged in her flesh to regain the upper hand. She quickly freed herself and killed all of Russo's men before pursuing the traitor all the way back to the plane, where she finally ended him. Afterward, Coulson tenderly assisted in patching up her wounds, an intimacy that Ward appeared wary of, just before they received word that the train had been located at a standstill. Coulson, May, and Ward entered the abandoned luggage compartment to find Simmons just waking up. Though they remained uncertain about the fates of Fitz and Skye. The two were still missing. Hours earlier back on the train, Skye had questioned Fitz about whether in 084 had ever been discovered as a person. Before Fitz could offer a definitive reply, however, their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of enemy agents. Fitz and Skye managed to hold off their attacker long enough for Simmons to intervene. She threw herself onto the man's grenade, which immediately plunged her into a deep sleep, mirroring the effects seen on the others. Fitz examined the spent grenade, noting that the technology was remarkably similar to the dendrotoxin used in their own night-night gun, except this version was delivered in a gaseous form. When the train finally ground to a halt, Fitz and Skye watched as the mysterious package was loaded into a waiting car. They pursued the transport all the way to a secluded villa where Ian Quinn soon arrived to oversee the operation. Skye and Leo could be seen on the outskirts of the manor, crouching low and hiding behind the dense bushes. "Activate the tracker. Let them know we are here," Skye spoke, her voice breaking the sudden silence. Fitz wasted no time. He activated the device, sending their precise coordinates back to Coulson and the rest of the team. He observed Skye for a moment, noting the determination in her posture. "You want to go in," he said. It wasn't a question, just a quiet observation. "We can't let Quinn get away again," Skye replied. They shared a brief, meaningful look before deciding to head inside. Skye tasked Fitz with sabotaging the getaway vehicles to prevent any escape, while she took the initiative to infiltrate the manor alone in search of the package. Once inside, she navigated down to the basement, where she discovered a large hyperbaric chamber. She peered through the glass, her eyes widening as she realized who was inside. The chamber contained Mike Peterson. Skye had met Peterson once before, back when he had saved a woman from a burning building, long before she had become a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. Ironically, she had been the one to warn him about the agency, claiming they existed only to cover up superhero-based events. Peterson was a centipede-enhanced super soldier, and the last time they had crossed paths, they had witnessed him being blown to Kingdom Come. Her surprise was short-lived as Quinn and his men quickly converged on her position. Quinn forced Mike from his slumber and attached a high-tech prosthesis that painfully transformed into a new leg. Under the orders of Quinn and the mysterious Clairvoyant, Mike reluctantly prepared for his next task. However, when instructed to kill Skye, he refused, stating firmly that her death was not part of his mission. As Mike departed, Quinn decided to take matters into his own hands. He pulled his weapon and shot Skye twice in the stomach. Upstairs, Mike brutally attacked the Italian mercenaries who had transported the package, punishing them for leading S.H.I.E.L.D. straight to the heart of the operation. Still outside, Fitz heard the commotion of the fight just as Coulson and the others arrived. A cold dread washed over him as he realized Skye must be in grave trouble. Coulson moved with tactical precision, managing to incapacitate Quinn before rushing to the basement. There, he found a bloodied but still living Skye. Thinking quickly, Simmons directed them to place Skye into the same hyperbaric chamber Mike had emerged from. The pressurized environment stabilized her, saving her life, though only for the moment. Later, aboard the bus, Ward seethed with a quiet fury that Coulson had allowed Skye to get hurt in the field, while a distraught Fitz did his best to comfort Simmons for her frantic efforts to prolong their friend's life. Melinda and Ward were alone when she spoke. "If Coulson thinks there's a chance in a million to save Skye, to save any of us, he'd take it. People like us, we need people like him." They shared a heavy, quiet silence before she finally left the room for the cockpit. Coulson and his team rushed Skye to the Shield Trauma Center in Zurich, Switzerland. After waiting all night, and failing to obtain any classified information about Skye's history from Director Fury, Dr. Jaswat informed Coulson that her condition was dire. They were faced with the impossible decision of whether or not to keep her on life support. Refusing to give up on Skye so easily, Coulson ordered her hospital room to be moved onto the bus. It was there that he decided to play his final trump card. Years prior, in the aftermath of the Battle of New York, Phil Coulson lay in his dark hospital room, partially illuminated by moonlight. He had been brought back from the brink. He touched the spot on his chest where Loki's scepter had pierced him, but he still struggled to comprehend his resurrection. His fellow agents had made it clear, it wouldn't be incorrect to state that Ethan Park was responsible for his return. Phil was lost in these thoughts when his senses, sharpened by years of training, picked up a sudden gust of wind in the room. Phil looked toward the shadows and smiled. "I couldn't blame you, I like that corner too," Phil stated. Footsteps echoed, and a face emerged from the darkness. It was Ethan, smiling. "Yeah. I saw the dark corner, I couldn't help myself," he replied. The smile on Phil's face dropped for a second. He had expected Fury or Hill, though it returned just as quickly. "Visiting hours are over, you know?" Ethan walked across the room to the single wooden chair, manually dragging it in front of Phil's hospital bed before lounging into it in a relaxed, casual manner while Phil watched in silence. "Heh. I apologize for disturbing your rest, but I am leaving the States. Before I go, I thought you should have this," Ethan said. Tora transmuted a wooden box containing his teleporting kunai. Coulson could only stare. He was about to speak, but Ethan continued, "We were at the shawarma joint downtown when Thor mentioned that your kunai got broken." "Oh. I don't know what to say, Park," Coulson replied, clearly overwhelmed. "Don't say anything. And here," Tora, sensing his intentions, transmuted a card and a pen into his hand. Ethan wrote something on it and slid it toward Coulson. "What's this?" "Your contact information." Coulson was shocked. Park was famously elusive. "Don't try tracking it, you won't be able to," Ethan replied with a smile. Indeed, this number was from a burner phone currently sealed inside a mirror dimension seal. And though incoming calls can be made, if a professional tried tracking the number, all they will receive are random coordinates across the globe. "Is that a challenge?" Phil asked playfully. Ethan simply shook his head and continued, "And next time, and I hope there is no next time, if there is, call me. This kunai will help you provide the exact coordinates." He made to stand as Ethan headed toward the open window. He looked back at Coulson one last time. "It took courage doing what you did," he said, referring to Coulson's confrontation with Loki during his escape from the helicarrier. "Stand proud, Coulson. You are strong." Chapter 58. Clairvoyant. And aboard the bus while Coulson was upstairs in his office locating Ethan's kunai, a different scene was unfolding below. In a fit of righteous fury, May brutally attacked Ian Quinn, who had been held in the bus's interrogation cage since Italy, for shooting Skye. She did not relent, continuing her assault until Quinn was coughing up blood and his face was a mask of crimson. Finally, Ward had to physically pull her off him. Just then, both of them heard Coulson's voice over the intercom, summoning them to the main lobby. "He deserves to die, not her," May stated as she entered the lobby, with Ward following close behind. "Agreed, but right now Quinn doesn't matter. Only Skye does," Coulson replied. "You heard what the doctor said, they can only make her comfortable," Melinda countered, her voice heavy and heaving, though the final words came out softer than the rest. "They said there is nothing they could do for her. But I was brought back from the dead by Ethan Park. If he could do that, I bet he can save Skye," Coulson explained. Just then, the sound of a Quinjet echoed in the distance, followed by a transmission over the radio. "Shield 616, this is Tower Michael Tango. You are in violation of Shield Directive 1297. Respond immediately." Ward and May shared a look. "Disobeying a direct order," Ward spoke first, looking toward Coulson. "We didn't hand Quinn over for interrogation." "Great," May muttered. She moved to the ship's built-in radio to communicate back. "This is Shield 616. How do we proceed?" Coulson moved toward the window to observe the approaching Quinjets as the bus leveled out in the sky. "Prepare to be boarded and relinquish command," came the cold response. As the transmission cut off, Coulson walked out of the lobby with Ward following him. May headed toward the medical station to bring Fitz and Simmons up to speed. "Really? Of all the war and chaos in the world, S.H.I.E.L.D. sends a plane after us, Coulson exclaimed. 3 planes, Ward corrected. A small transport to dock and a pair of F-35s tonsure we hand over Quinn. S.H.I.E.L.D. intercepted the bus, sending agents John Garrett and Antoine Triplett to board the aircraft and retrieve Quinn. Coulson explained to Garrett that Quinn had shot one of his agents and they could not relinquish him until Skye was safe. The unsaid threat didn't get unnoticed by Garrett. If Skye didn't survive, neither will Quinn. Garrett appeared empathetic to Coulson's situation, stating that he himself had lost 3 of his own chasing Ian Quinn, and they agreed to a temporary truce, where Garrett gets to interrogate Quinn on the bus immediately. On the other hand, the interaction between Ward and Triplett was less cordial. After initially discussing the interior of the bus, the 2 agents descended into a physical confrontation when Ward refused to hand over the prisoner. Ward managed to overpower Triplett, but Garrett and Coulson interrupted the fight. They informed Ward that they had received permission from their superiors to interrogate Quinn aboard the plane, rather than immediately transporting him to the fridge. The fridge is a massive S.H.I.E.L.D. detainment and storage facility at a classified location. The structure stands 100 stories tall and can only be accessed through the roof. Inside the lab, I don't understand how he saved Coulson. Instant tissue regeneration? How did he revive the dead cells in Coulson's brain after the loss of oxygen? It all seems so diabolical. Simmons spoke, having reviewed the files related to Coulson's resurrection for the 100th time. I agree, but we can't argue with results. He's walking around, isn't he? Fitz replied. They were squared away in their lab. On the main screen, Skye could be seen attached to life support. They both looked toward Skye before Simmons continued. Yeah, but at what cost? We were both there. Coulson was brought back from the dead, not from near death, but from death. No beating heart, no brain activity, nothing. Yeah, but this is different, Fitz countered. Skye isn't dead. Just then May entered the lab. You two. Be present in the main lobby in 10 minutes. Coulson intends to summon Park, she commanded before leaving. Fitz and Simmons share a grim look. Inside the cage, Coulson and Garrett entered the bus's interrogation room. And here I thought I was going to get to play bad cop, Garrett remarked, eyeing the bloody condition May had left Quinn in. Ian Quinn, this is Agent Garrett. He's here to ask you some questions, Coulson explained in a monotonous voice. No, thank you. My head is still ringing from the last visitor, Quinn argued. At least the last visitor left you with a head, Garrett quipped. I'm not always that considerate. I'm interested in one of your newer projects. But there are so many to choose from. Quinn tried to deflect, but Garrett reached out and gripped his jaw tightly. Let me be clear. You have no rights and no lawyer. The only thing keeping Agent Coulson from throwing you out of this plane is the very weak heartbeat of a young agent downstairs. And the only incentive I have for not tearing your tongue out is the hope that you'll use it to answer my questions. Is that clear? Garrett made it perfectly clear. He was comfortable operating in a morally gray area. Quinn mumbled something that sounded like an affirmation. Garrett tightened his grip and looked at Coulson. Do you understand that? No, Coulson replied immediately. Garrett let go of Ian and sat back. Tell me everything you know about cybertech and the Deathlock program, he instructed. Deathlock? Coulson questioned. Catchy, right? Sounds like some wrestler from the 80s, Garrett replied, looking directly at Ian. What is it really? Garrett asked. Those are dangerous waters, Ian replied. And the last agent who waded into them wound up with 2 in the stomach. He received a sharp backhand for his troubles. Coulson accuses Quinn of shooting Skye because what she saw back in Italy what the cybertech delivered. Quinn also revealed that it was the Clairvoyant who had disclosed the locations of the 3 Garrett-led agents who were killed in Berlin and Morocco. The Clairvoyant sees everything, except for how Ethan Park brings back the dead, Quinn explained, his gaze fixed on Coulson. This is still about me, Coulson whispered. Wait. You're going to need to rewind the tape, Phil, Garrett said, stepping directly in front of Coulson. You heard about how Park brought me back from near death right after the Battle of New York, right? After receiving a nod of affirmation from Garrett, Phil continued. There is more to it than that. Official reports say I was gone for 6 minutes. Turns out it was hours. That's impossible, Garrett remarked. That's why the Clairvoyant will do anything to know how it happened, Quinn added. Even ordering you to shoot Skye, Coulson replied, finally reaching the grim conclusion. Wait. You don't know what Park actually did to save you, Garrett noted, observing Phil's grave expression. That's why we were going to call Park here before you guys showed up, Phil explained. So shooting the girl forces you to summon Ethan Park, Garrett continued. So the clairvoyant can finally see, Quinn added. Or you let the girl die, Garrett finished. Inside Coulson's office, Coulson was back in his office, with May and Simmons beside him. He had just informed them of what had occurred in the cage, specifically, that the clairvoyant was the mastermind behind Sky's shooting. Frankly, sir, Fitz and I only understand about 70% of what happened to you. We still have no idea how. It was possible, even though we saw him performing what he called reverse curse technique. Within the medical community, the spontaneous regeneration of muscle tissue had long been relegated to the realm of the impossible, that is, until Ethan Park proved otherwise. Simmons clarified. I highly doubt that even if this clairvoyant saw Mr. Park performing RCT, they would be able to replicate it with technology. Seeing the slightly skeptically look on May's face, Coulson asked. You disagree? I think we need to do everything humanly possible to save Sky, May offered her 2 cents. But we have to acknowledge that doing so might give the clairvoyant exactly what he wants. We are assuming he wants to know how Park heals, based on the words of a man who shot Sky, and in our line of work, assumption kills. It's a risk we have to take, Coulson replied, leaving no room for argument, and so all 3 of them made their way to the bus main lounge. In the main lounge, Agent Garrett lounged across the side sofa while Agent Ward leaned against the door frame. Agents Triplet and Fitz were fidgeting with the hollow table when Coulson walked in holding an antique wooden box, followed closely by Simmons and May. Garrett stood up straight. So this is what all this circus is about, huh? Garrett remarked, taking a closer look at the box Coulson had brought. Not the box, it's what's inside, Coulson explained as he opened it. Inside it lay a knife, a specialized, 3-pronged weapon designed by Tora to Ethan's specifications to facilitate long-distances travel through shadow manipulation. It features a unique trident-shaped blade, a thicker-than-normal yellow grip for better handling, and a sealing formula on the handle that serves as a permanent teleportation marker that had occurred due to the sacrifice of Rabbit Escape Shikigami. The room was packed. Ward, Garrett, and Triplet stood on the left, while May, Fitz, Simmons, and Coulson occupied the right, with the kunai resting in the center of the room. So how do you do it? Just throw it at the ground? Triplet questioned. The weapon before them had become legendary within the spy community, even before the Battle of New York cemented Ethan's fame. Its reputation had been forged in the aftermath of the destroyer attack on Puente Antiguo, New Mexico. No, before that I make a phone call, Phil answered, midway through dialing Ethan's number. Wait a second, you have Park's contact information? How? Garrett asked, visibly stunned. He gave it to me after the Battle of New York. I guess dying has some perks, huh? Phil quipped, attempting to lighten the mood that he initiated the call. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings, and on the 4th the call was picked up and Coulson put it on speaker. What is it, Coulson? Don't tell me you're calling to wish me a happy new year. Before Coulson could reply, a series of sounds erupted through the speaker. Boom. Boom. Yes. Yes. Kill that boy. Kill that boy, Tora. Ethan's energetic voice followed, punctuated by the rhythmic sound of his clapping. Coulson and May, who was standing right behind him, shared a weary look as Coulson continued. Are you in the middle of something, Park? Coulson took the phone off speaker and stepped into the next room. You aren't actually harming anyone, are you? He felt compelled to ask. Don't worry, it's just a friendly competition, Ethan explained, just as another massive explosion rocked the line. Boom. It doesn't sound friendly, Coulson thought. Ethan was in the mirror dimension with the evening sun overhead, surrounded on all sides by vast water with no land in sight. They had chosen this isolated location for the duel, as Jack would call it. The news of what had happened to Rosalyn Dyer had already reached them. Even Ethan was slightly disturbed by the level of cruelty Jack had displayed. This guy is a cursed spirit to the core, he had thought, but Ethan had let the matter rest. Tora, however, had not. He had warned Ethan against sending the freak to deal with Dyer from the start. Once Jack returned with his report, Tora was not pleased with the casual cruelty displayed by the cursed spirit. A certain level he could accept. For him, cruelty need to serve a purpose, like in Caleb cases where it served to send a message to those who thought they could use innocent victims to force Ethan's hands. Without it they were no better than the cursed beings they were fighting against. Seeing that Ethan was seriously considering never using him for foreseeable future, Jack had desperately proposed a gentleman's duel against Tora to prove his worth. The point was not to win, but to show he could still be of use, predictably. Jack was currently receiving the beating of his life, a thrashing second only to the day he had lost against Ethan himself. Though he had proved his point, having managed to keep pace with Tora for the opening minutes, the tide had clearly turned. Coulson had then explained the current situation and Sky's dire predicament to Ethan over the line. Returning to the main lounge, Phil walked toward the kunai resting in the center of the room. He picked it up and flicked it back onto the floor. The room fell into a heavy silence. Ward and Triplet stood straighter. May shifted her combat stance. Fitz and Simmons watched from the sidelines, their eyes fixed on the weapon, while Garrett shifted in his seat and arched forward in anticipation. A second later, Ethan flickered into existence before them. He had, of course, agreed to board the bus and heal Sky. While every high-ranking S.H.I.E.L.D. agent knew of his teleportation abilities, seeing it firsthand left the room momentarily stunned. Coulson was the first to break the trance. "Ethan, this is," he began to introduce his team, but Ethan raised a hand to silence him. "Introductions can wait. Take me to your agent," Park spoke, his gaze sweeping the room. Though his eyes lingered for a fraction of a second longer on Ward and Garrett than the others. Chapter 59, Sky. Ethan was inside the medical pod where Sky lay, while the rest of the team stood watch just outside. She is not in good shape, Ethan thought. He enveloped his right arm in a concentrated shroud of reverse curse technique energy while observing Sky's condition from a distance. The rounds perforated her stomach and penetrated both the large and small intestines. The surgeons who operated on her must have resected a significant portion of her organs just to keep her alive, but that only makes my job more difficult, he analyzed further. Cases involving heavy internal trauma like this were always difficult to manage. If you provided too much positive energy, you risked triggering uncontrolled cellular growth, essentially giving the patient cancer, but if you provided too little, you might as well not have tried at all. Ethan brought his right hand near the wound and began outputting the RCT slowly. Outside the medical pod, the agents surrounded the glass, watching Park intently. At the left side window, Agent Triplet and Agent Simmons were speaking in hushed tones. "It's tough when it's your team," Triplet said. "You guys go back a ways?" "Not really, just a few months. We have nothing in common, couldn't be more different," Simmons answered, her focus on Sky undeterred. "But you couldn't imagine a life without her," Triplet concluded, noting the slight break in Simmons' voice. Simmons looked at him. "Yes. Have you experienced that, Agent Triplet?" "I have," Trip replied, and after a pause he continued, "Sometimes a person takes you by surprise." "Yeah," Simmons agreed. "She is very lucky to have you. I know if anything bad ever happens to me, I hope I have you in my corner too," Triplet spoke. Simmons and Trip looked towards each other for a second, then the latter focused back on Sky. Off to the side, Fitz, who was also focused on the procedure, caught the tail end of the conversation. His head snapped in Trip's direction, though he shook it a second later and refocused on Ethan. Sky's heartbeat began to stabilize as Ethan continued the reverse curse technique (RCT) treatment. On the right side of the window, Agent Coulson and Agent Garrett stood beside each other. Garrett finally spoke. "Why isn't he using those disc devices like he did after the Battle of New York?" Coulson looked toward him with a signature smile. "You haven't read the reports regarding Ethan, have you?" "Of course not. Those reports are Omega level only the director, deputy director, or members of the Security Council have access to them," Garrett remarked. Coulson's smile remained, though he didn't admit to anything. As he and John locked eyes, a look of realization passed over Garrett's face. "And you wrote those reports?" Coulson turned back toward Sky. "Let's just say those discs, Vitalis, as Park calls them, are more of an extension than the actual source. Park is able to perform RCT naturally through his own body." Garrett gritted his teeth. "Damn you, Fury," Garrett thought bitterly. What Phil didn't know, or rather couldn't know, was that Garrett had actually read those reports. After all, he was no longer just an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., but an operative of Hydra, and Secretary Pierce had provided him with the classified contents. Some time ago, John Garrett had joined the Hydra cell embedded deep within S.H.I.E.L.D. in 1990. He had stepped on an IED in Sarajevo, and that was the beginning of his end. The blast left him critically wounded. and he was abandoned by S.H.I.E.L.D. to die. However, Garrett survived the blast, and when Hydra offered him a chance to be whole again to become the first test subject in Project Deathlock, a joint initiative between Hydra and their allies at Cybertech Corporation to build a super soldier via cybernetic prosthetics, he grabbed it with both hands open. Decades later, Garrett's organic systems began to fail. Leaving his biomechanical enhancements as the only things keeping him alive, he had been desperately searching for a way to stall his imminent mortality. To the point that he had become highly invested in the centipede serum after witnessing the results in Mike Peterson. However, the serum proved too volatile. The only reason Peterson had survived was because Phil's team had shot him with a neurotoxin from the night-night gun at the exact right moment. The resulting chemical mixture had somehow stabilized the serum inside him. In other words, it was pure, unadulterated luck that he was now ostensibly hunting the same Deathlock program while maintaining his cover as a loyal S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. Using his own Level 7 clearance, he had granted himself the moniker of the Clairvoyant. Yes, Garrett was the Clairvoyant. When Coulson informed Garrett about Ethan's RCT, he realized in that moment exactly what Fury had done. The report the World Security Council must have received was a heavily redacted version of the one Coulson had provided to Fury. Nick Fury had altered the original documentation to make it appear as though Ethan's healing capabilities were entirely dependent on those Vitalis discs, and it was far from the first time the director had redacted and presented a skewed version of the truth to the council. Dissemination of intelligence, as Fury liked to call it. Just then every agent outside the medical pod heard it, the chant, partial summoning Chimera Samsara. The wheel of harmony materialized above Ethan's head, and the glow of his RCT intensified. Clunk. Every case was unique when it came to healing. Every patient had their own physiological adaptations to overcome before the true healing could begin. Chapter 60. The Trojan Horse. Come on, Sky, Coulson muttered under his breath as he saw her heartbeat stabilizing, letting out a sigh of relief. It's working, Fitz added. Everyone shared a smile of triumph, but the moment of victory was short-lived. As Ethan was regenerating Sky's inner organs, she began to code. Every agent rushed into the pod at the sound of the machine. Simmons was at the front, followed by Fitz. She is having a cardiac episode, Ethan realized, though he remained calm. Beep beep. Beep beep. Beep beep. She's spiking. Melinda exclaimed. Stop it. Ethan, how can we stop it? Coulson spoke. Sky, what is happening? Coulson asked, looking at Ethan desperately. She is having a cardiac arrest, Ethan replied as he continued outputting RCT undeterred. It's bad, right? Ward asked. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Having a heart attack during such a delicate procedure? Yeah, it's bad, Ethan replied. Do something. We have to do something. Fitz spoke frantically, on the verge of tears. We? Ethan thought while shaking his head. Simmons reached the opposite side of Ethan and started stroking Sky's head gently. Why are you so calm then? She asked, though there was venom in her tone. Did Park even care if Sky lived? Just as she finished, Sky began to stabilize. The rhythmic, consistent waveforms, paired with a stable heart rate of 59 and a normal blood pressure of 112/67, indicated that Ethan's reverse curse technique had effectively stabilized her physiology. Sky was no longer in critical danger. Her heartbeat, she is stabilizing, Simmons spoke. Park? Coulson asked. Ethan nodded his head. She is a strong one, isn't she? She will be all right. Then turning towards Simmons he replied, and to answer your previous question, Dr. Simmons, I was calm because I have performed similar procedures 1,000 times over. Panicking wouldn't have helped anyone. It wasn't arrogance that made me say that, just the quiet confidence one gains after performing a task several times. As for why Sky suffered a heart attack, Ethan deduced that as the RCT energy forced her cells to grow, they rapidly depleted the bloodstream of potassium and phosphate. This created a severe electrolyte imbalance that disrupted the electrical conduction of the heart, leading to arrhythmias like ventricular fibrillation and sudden cardiac arrest. It was rare, but in cases like hers, where she had already suffered from severe blood loss and subsequent surgery, it became much more probable. Thank you for saving my friend. Simmons answered with a sob. Can someone tell me what we just saw? Ward questioned. The girl's a fighter. What did you do to her? Triplet questioned Park. I feel like I've answered enough questions for a week, Park replied with a sigh. However, as something occurred to him, his face lit up. "Coulson, I'm taking a look around your plane. Consider it payment rendered. And I'm taking this one with me," he said, pointing toward Fitz. "Why me?" Fitz questioned, taking a step back. He didn't get far, though. Ethan reached out and gripped him firmly by the shoulder. "You're the engineer, right?" Ethan asked. "Yes, how did you know?" Fitz questioned frantically. Ethan simply looked around the room and then back at Fitz. Every agent followed his gaze. No words were spoken, but the collective silence carried the same thought. "It's obvious, you're the scientist here." Fitz followed the gesture and his face fell. "Never mind." With a nod from Coulson, the two made their way out. If Ethan remembered correctly, the Zephyr 1, which was created after the bus was destroyed, was capable of both space and time travel, and both were designed and made by Leo Fitz. Ethan didn't require time travel yet, but space travel was something he was genuinely looking forward to. Lately, Ethan had been considering a retirement plan. What if he actually accomplished his goal? If he erased cursed spirits from existence, then what? He wouldn't die naturally anytime soon. With Maharaga's assistance, he could live for the next 300 to 400 years practically without aging, possibly longer. Exploring space seemed like a fine way to spend that time. While he could technically survive in the vacuum of outer space by himself, a ship would still be essential. Imaging a spacecraft imbued with the gravity sheep or his wood dragon Shikigami, a smile formed on Ethan's face. With the 10 shadows, the possibilities were endless. 10 minutes later, Coulson and Garrett were in the bus's main office. "I want to thank you, Garrett, for letting us keep Quinn on the plane," Coulson spoke. "Don't mention it. There is still time for me to make his life a long living hell," Garrett countered. "I'm counting on it," Coulson reaffirmed. "There is something I need to ask you, Phil," Garrett said. "We have known each other a long time." "Yes, we have," Coulson agreed. "We have shared tight spots together. Had it gone the other way, if the Boy Wonder hadn't arrived and Sky hadn't survived, were you really prepared to throw Quinn off this plane?" Garrett questioned. "You were the one who made that threat." "I just asked to keep him on the bus for a while," Coulson countered with a signature smile. "You're right. I made that threat." "My mistake," Garrett smiled back. He had his answer. Coulson wouldn't have hesitated. "One more thing. Could you ask the Boy Wonder to provide us with a supplementary quantity of those Vitalis for our agents? I could have saved my people if I'd had those." "You can ask him yourself. I'm sure he won't refuse." "I haven't even properly introduced you two yet," Coulson said as he began descending the stairs. After the introduction, Garrett explained the issue to Ethan, who asked, "Agent Garrett, are you to engage in a firefight in the next 2 hours?" "What? No. Why?" Garrett fired back. "Then I can't help you, Agent. You see, my Vitalis are made of ordinary metal. They break under the strain of my jujitsu in under 2 hours. That's why I mostly imbue them on the spot," Ethan explained with a smile. Garrett stood frozen, his persona's mask dropping for a second. He couldn't exactly tell Ethan he was injured without risking his Deathlock secret being revealed to Phil and S.H.I.E.L.D. He couldn't force the issue without risking exposure. Garrett's brain was already planning his next move, a scenario so intense and deadly that Ethan Park would be forced to distribute a vast amount of those Vitalis. If a few went missing along the way, they wouldn't be missed. All he had to do was kill some rabbits to make it happen. "I see, that's unfortunate," Garrett spoke, his smile returning. However, as he and Coulson made their way to the upper deck, Ethan called out from the lab, "Agent Garrett, catch!" Garrett looked back just in time to see a disc flying in his direction. He instinctively caught it and looked down. This was it. This was a Vitalis. He looked back at Ethan, who was already speaking. "Those are some nasty burn wounds." "3rd degree?" "Yes," Garrett answered immediately, his hand reaching for his collar. He realized it was pulled down. When had he pulled it down? "Any friend of Coulson is a friend of mine," Ethan spoke, winking at Phil as he headed back toward Fitz. "You stupid son of a bitch," Garrett thought. "I guess being friends with someone who died and came back has its own perks too," he said, waving the disc. Coulson was also smiling. What Garrett didn't know, or rather couldn't know, was that the Vitalis Ethan had given him wasn't meant to heal. It was a Trojan horse. It was designed to overload his system with enough RCT to trigger stage 4 cancerous growth within a week, a rate far faster than his natural vitality could handle. He will initially feel great, until suddenly he won't. As for someone investigating his death, Hydra won't risk it, not when they were so close to Project Insight. John Garrett. Will probably pass away from a plane crash or something similar. Ethan, of course, had his own plans regarding said project, but those have to wait for the right moment. Chapter 61, Unwanted Guest and Lady Sif. Jimmy Mackenzie was a man deeply in love with his wife, Rosalyn. They had married earlier that day and were finally on their way to their long-awaited honeymoon. Jimmy was a complicated man who had once lost his job due to drug addiction. He had been at the absolute nadir of his life, but Rosa had never left his side. She was the one who got him clean. She was there on the nights where his craving got worst, holding him close, and seeing her work so hard for his sake had changed everything within him. That he got his life together, secured a stable job, and he and Rosa were finally in a good place, and when he proposed she said yes. Rosa was far too good for him and he knew it. He had decided to treat her so well that she would never realize just how far out of his league she truly was. But then, as they began their honeymoon journey through Nevada, traveling across the country, he encountered this woman at a gas station. He realized he had been wrong about Rosa. She wasn't his true love after all. This new woman is. The moment he laid eyes on her, he knew they were soulmates. She called herself Laurelai. Laurelai is an guardian sorceress of immense power, capable of using her voice to ensnare the minds of men in ancient times. She attempted to conquer the 9 realms using her abilities and very nearly succeeded in taking over Midgard. Though she was ultimately defeated by Lady Sif in the process, she earned Sif's eternal hatred. Roughly 600 years ago, Laurelai enchanted Halder, a man Sif was romantically involved with, leading to his tragic death at Sif's own hands. Laurelai subsequently spent centuries imprisoned in the Asgardian dungeons before finally escaping during the Second Dark Elf conflict and Malekith's invasion of Asgard. Now she has arrived on Midgard once again, appearing near Death Valley, Nevada. Laurelai had, of course, enchanted Jimmy, having left Rosa stranded in the middle of the wasteland. She and Jimmy pulled up to a gas station in the Nevada desert in his open-roof sedan. While Jimmy went into the station, Laurelai enchanted the leader of the Dogs of Hell MC, who happened to be present at the stop. When Jimmy emerged and saw a man bothering Laurelai, he dropped the bags he was holding and moved to confront him. "This guy bothering you?" he asked Laurelai. "No, he is with me now," Laurelai answered simply. "What?" "No. I am with you," Jimmy insisted. "You said we would be together forever, remember?" he pleaded. "I said, we'd be together until the end," Laurelai replied. Any warmth she had held a second ago vanished, replaced by a sadistic smile. "It is the end." As she finished, she backhanded Jimmy, who went flying with the force of a speeding truck. Jimmy Mackenzie died on the spot from blunt force trauma. Seeing Jimmy's body fly back, the gang leader asked, "Who are you?" "I am Laurelai." "Now introduce me to all my men," she commanded with a smug smile. Back on the bus, Skye came to in her hospital bed. She tried to sit up and stretch her muscles, only for Simmons to rush in and reprimand her. Simmons collected a blood sample before Agent Ward entered to update her on Mike Peterson's status. Eventually, the matter of her own training came up. "Well, I need to better protect myself," Skye said. "So, when Simmons gives the all-clear, will we start training?" "We will ease you back into it," Ward affirmed. "No, I want to train harder. Next time I don't want to depend on someone else to arrive and save me," she spoke with conviction. "All right," Ward agreed. "Careful what you wish for." "And is Park still here?" Skye asked. Ward looked uncomfortable for a moment. His instincts told him that Ethan didn't like him, though that shouldn't have been possible. He barely knew the man. "Yeah, he's still here. Hovering all over Fitz, asking him all sorts of questions, something related to the bus," Ward clarified. He had listened in on their conversation while performing his daily exercise routine that morning. "It seems Park might simply be an airplane enthusiast," Ward concluded. "I still can't believe it. One of the Avengers saved me. And Ethan Park, of all people, the guy is a ghost, and he's impossible to locate or track." "Trust me, I've tried," Skye said at length. "How did that even happen?" "Coulson," Ward replied and then hesitated, his jaw tightening. "They go way back, pre-New York. Coulson keeps a direct line to him. Honestly, Skye, I wouldn't worry about how to contact him. The way he acts, the way he looks at us. I don't think he likes working with others. Or maybe it's just S.H.I.E.L.D. he doesn't like. But he saved me, he came when Coulson called," Skye countered, her voice low. "And I appreciate that, we all do, but..." Ward started, only for Skye to cut him off. "But what?" Her voice was no longer soft. Ward studied her for a moment. Nothing. Forget I said anything. He had been trying to poison Sky's opinion of Ethan, but perhaps he had pushed too far, too fast. He needed to slow it down. Did I end the lab? Simmons hunched over a microscope, frustrated. She had been trying to analyze a sample of Sky's blood, which had been saturated with fresh RCT, but all her attempts yielded nothing. There were no new chemical signatures introduced into the system. It was as if the organs had been regenerated by energy from outside the body. But that should have been impossible, right? Could RCT be based on externally application of energy to revive dead cells? Meanwhile, Coulson unsuccessfully tried to get a clue regarding Fury's location from Agent Sitwell. Shortly after, the team received orders from SHIELD HQ to deploy to the Nevada-California border, where the agency had detected energy signatures similar to the ones Eric Selvig and Jane Foster had discovered in New Mexico. In the briefing room. New orders. SHIELD is detecting massive energy readings in the skies over the California-Nevada border, Melinda announced. They were all in the briefing room: Fitz, Simmons, Ward, May, and Park. Ethan was on the far side of the room, apparently napping. Coulson, however, was notably absent. "Where is Agent Coulson?" Ward asked. "Taking personal time," May replied shortly. Ward started to speak, but Simmons cut him off. "These are the same readings that Dr. Selvig and Dr. Foster picked up in New Mexico before the destroyer attack. They herald the arrival of an Asgardian." "Thor?" Fitz questioned immediately. "Not sure," Melinda replied. "Either way, SHIELD wants us to be the welcome wagon," May added. "Okay, fine, no cause for concern. Asgardians are allies," Fitz tried to justify. "Loki wasn't," Ward countered. "I highly doubt it's an unfriendly," Park finally spoke, his right hand still draped over his face, eyes closed. Every eye turned in his direction. The team looked at one another. It had only been a day since Park arrived, yet his presence was already heavy. "Why is that?" May asked. "The readings are similar to the Bifrost, right?" Park asked, sitting up straight and looking towards Simmons for confirmation. "The Rainbow Bridge?" "Yes, they are," Simmons replied quickly. "Well then, the Bifrost cannot be accessed by just anyone. Only 2 people can truly authorize it," Ethan spoke, holding up 2 fingers to demonstrate. "First, the King of Asgard, Odin himself. And second, at the discretion of the gatekeeper, Heimdall." "We didn't know that," Fitz replied with a relieved smile. "Then it's 100% a friendly." "Not 100%, Park corrected. "There is the off chance that Asgard has been conquered, and what's coming is an army to subjugate Earth." Silence fell over the briefing room for several seconds until Fitz broke it with a nervous laugh. "Hee hee, that's a fine joke, mate. What are the chances that an empire that has lasted for millennia would fall in a few days?" Ethan stood up and stretched. "You'd be surprised," he said, walking toward the door. "Well, good luck with your unwanted guest." "You're not coming with us?" Simmons asked, watching his retreating form. Ethan didn't stop walking. With his back still turned toward them, he waved a hand nonchalantly. And if it is an army, it was nice knowing you all." "Haha." He ignored the question entirely, the sound of his laughter fading as he made his way toward the medical pod where Sky lay. His words had rattled the rest of the SHIELD agents, especially Fitz. "He's kidding with us, right?" "Doesn't matter now." "Let's go," May pronounced, her voice cutting through the tension. As it turned out, it wasn't an army. While out in the field, Lady Sif arrived via the Bifrost. "I am Lady Sif of Asgard," she introduced herself to Agents May and Ward, her expression grim as she made a startling claim. "Your world is in grave danger." She was promptly brought back to the bus. Coulson stood near the tarmac of the bus with May at his side. "She is a warrior," he said. "I saw her fight in New Mexico alongside Thor and Park. She climbed a giant metal killing machine and speared it with her double-bladed sword. It was pretty badass." Melinda smiled and informed Phil of Lady Sif's request. "She said she needs SHIELD's help in locating someone. You up for this?" "Can't be worse than an alien invasion," Coulson said without thinking. A look of realization immediately passed over his face as he and May locked eyes. "I jinxed it, didn't I?" May simply shook her head and asked, "What about Park?" "What about him?" Coulson redirected. "Really?" Melinda asked, exasperated. "How about asking for his help with the problem we have on hand?" Phil ignored her question. Let's go, we don't want to keep her waiting for too long. The truth was Phil had tried asking for Ethan's help for the problems S.H.I.E.L.D. handles on daily basis, but Ethan as always has refused, stating he was too busy to take any more workload. Inside the briefing room, Lady Sif stood facing the monitor as Phil entered. Sif turned around, her expression softening slightly but remaining resolute. "We meet again, son of Cowl," she said with a grave nod. "I wish it were under better circumstances." "I understand you are looking for someone," Phil answered, his face calm. "I am hunting her." "Laurelai," Sif clarified. 600 years ago she used her powers to wreak havoc across the 9 realms, to command armies and bring down kings and entire empires. "What kind of powers are we talking about?" Ward questioned. "Strength? Speed?" Sif shook her head. "Sorcery. She bends and shifts the will of men to her purpose." Grim expression on everyone's faces somehow became grimmer. "Only men? Her powers don't work on women?" May asked. "No," Lady Sif clarified. "Men have an inherent weakness we do not share." May nodded at her words with a small smile. "I can't imagine what she is talking about," Fitz whispered to Ward. Lady Sif picked up the comment regardless. The very sound of her voice can ensnare most. For the rare man who can resist, it is her voice joined by her touch that will overpower his will. Only Loki was known to be able to resist her charms. "How do we stop her?" Coulson questioned. "By using this," Sif spoke as she produced an enchanted collar. "It prevents her from speaking. She wore one for centuries while incarcerated in the dungeons of Asgard. She escaped following the Dark Elf invasion, utilizing one of Loki's secret shadow paths between worlds to travel to Midgard." "Dark Elf invasion?" Coulson picked up, his interest piqued. "It was a significant ordeal," Sif answered. "Ethan greatly helped us in that regard. Asgard remains grateful." "Ah, he did he?" Coulson replied with his signature smile. Just then, Ethan's voice drifted from the opposite direction of where Lady Sif was facing. "Yeah. Dark elves. Nasty business, I tell you," Ethan spoke, seemingly appearing from the ground up. "Literally creatures of darkness who came to bring eternal night, ha. The irony is, most of them died in a sun." Sif immediately spun around, her hand dropping to the hilt of her sword. Ethan emerged fully from the shadows and stood opposite her. "Hey, Sif," he spoke softly. Everyone in the room turned, startled by his sudden emergence. "How is Vanaheim?" After realizing who it was, Sif removed her hand from her weapon. "Vanaheim is at peace. The civil unrest has been resolved, and the people finally have enough food to feed their young again," she replied. Following the Dark Elf invasion, Sif had personally led the Asgardian forces to restore order to the realm. "What are you doing here, Park?" she asked. "One of Coulson's team members was fatally injured," he said, gesturing toward Phil. "He called for me." Sif immediately turned toward Coulson, who sensed the unspoken question. "She is okay now," Phil answered. "This Laurelai sounds like a piece of work, hee, count me in." Ethan finished as he dipped back in his shadow. Chapter 62, Confrontation, Part 1. Half an hour later, Ethan lay back in his chair relaxed, while Coulson's team worked to locate Laurelai. He can't help in this process, and he knew it. Even though Ethan had watched the show in his previous life, he only remembered the general outline. The finer details eluded him, unlike the main movies which he had watched several times. "Tora?" Ethan called out through their mental link. "What are the chances that this Laurelai will be able to enchant me?" Her chances should be 0 to none, Tora replied. "The general has already adapted to any and all forms of mind manipulation spells found within the Kamartaj archives." "Should be?" Ethan questioned, catching the slight hesitation. "Yes. The only reason I cannot state it with absolute certainty is my own lack of knowledge regarding Aesir sorcery. However, at most she might be able to immobilize you for a few seconds until the wheel turns," Tora reaffirmed. Ethan buzzed as he stood up. "Let's see what our resident scientists are up to." In the briefing room, Coulson and Lady Sif stood before the holodeble, the blue light reflecting off their faces. "These are police reports from a 100-mile radius of your arrival point," Coulson informed Sif, tapping the holodeble to bring the files onto the main screen. "Everything from the last 48 hours. Lady Sif began scanning the documents. Coulson watched her for a moment before fishing for information. "So, how exactly did Ethan help you with this Dark Elf invasion of yours?" Sif's hand stilled. She looked at Coulson directly. He decimated their army, she spoke simply. Coulson shook his head, trying to process the scale of it. I think he did something similar with the Chitauri. Did he use the rabbits during your invasion? The final battle actually occurred in Svartalfheim, the Dark Elves' homeworld, Sif continued, returning her gaze to the documents. So it was more of a counter-invasion that ended the conflict. And no, I don't believe he used rabbits. He used moths though. He has moths too, Coulson noted mentally. What other animals does he have? Coulson spoke in a pow. Sif opened another file and began scrolling through the data. Well, there is the tiger, Lord Tora, that utilizes sorcery, the deer that can heal, and the wood dragon that can fly at subsonic speed, and of course the moths. Lady Sif listed them all in a single breath. She looked thoughtful for a moment. Midgardians shouldn't be able to see these cursed creatures under normal conditions. Neither should you be able to perceive them, son of Cowl, Sif replied, her eyes narrowing as she studied Coulson's shoulder. There, a low-grade cursed spirit lay coiled, its translucent neck wriggling against his suit. Sif suddenly brought her right arm down in a swift, sharp chopping motion near his neck, slicing through the air with precision. A second later, Coulson blinked in surprise. What did you just do? I feel lighter for some reason. Cursed spirits are one of the greatest natural threats Midgard faces, Sif explained solemnly. Cursed spirits? We can't see them? Coulson thought, wiping a stray bead of sweat from his forehead. There. A jewel robbery, Lady Sif said, pulling up a slide. And there. A gun store robbery by men on Harleys, Coulson added, clicking to the next image, though his face showed clear unease with the knowledge he had just received. It is happening faster than I feared. She is amassing men, gold, and weaponry. Laurelai is building an army, Lady Sif concluded grimly. In the weapons room. We've traced those men to a biker bar called Rosie's Desert Oasis, Ward announced as he walked in from the tarmac. He entered the room where Fitz was calibrating icers and Ethan was seemingly preoccupied, tossing a bouncing ball into the air and catching it. Ward paused for a second, taking in the strange scene, just as May entered beside him. Coulson and Lady Sif followed shortly after. Suit up. Our ETA is 15 minutes, Coulson commanded. Hey Phil, Ethan said between tosses. Can you get me a photo of the outside of this bar? Coulson looked confused for a moment but complied. He nodded toward Fitz and within seconds a vivid image of the bar's exterior appeared on the screen. Though invisible to all but two people in the room, another presence made itself known. Greetings, Lord Tora, Lady Sif said with a respectful nod. Lady Sif, Tora returned the nod. Fair tidings to you as well, he replied, his voice like grinding gravel. Who are you talking to? Fitz asked, looking around the empty space. Lady Sif looked at him, then at Ethan. Ethan sighed. Normal humans can't see my Shikigami without being in immediate danger of death, he explained. He caught the bouncing ball with one hand and brought it down onto the table with a heavy resonating thud. Coulson's team exchanged skeptical glances, though Coulson himself wore a grim expression. They didn't outright reject the claim, but the tension was palpable. Ethan, let's pause for a moment. Are you telling us there are threats that normal humans like us simply can't see? Coulson questioned, his gaze narrowing. And you've been keeping this from us? Ethan turned his head sharply toward Sif, who immediately evaded eye contact, finding a sudden interest in the wall behind him. Really, Sif? Ethan questioned as he shook his head. Yes, she told me, Coulson interrupted, leaning forward. The question is, why didn't you? Ethan looked over at Tora, whose hands were already encased in shimmering, rotating eldritch magic circles. Do it, Ethan commanded. A second later, everyone in the immediate vicinity experienced a wave of foggy, distorted vision that rapidly began to clear. Fitz was the first to react, his voice cracking. Bloody hell. Is that a panthera? A bipedal tiger? Coulson, May, and Ward were equally bewildered. Ward's hand instinctively drifted toward his ICR. Is that a cursed spirit? Coulson asked, his voice low and steady despite the shock. Tora and Ethan exchanged a brief look. With a silent nod from Ethan, Tora began, No, Agent Coulson. I am Ethan's Shikigami, linked to his very soul via his innate technique. And the reason I didn't tell you about cursed spirits is quite simple, Ethan said, sitting upright and closing the distance. You see, cursed spirits are born from the negative emotions of humanity: anger, sadness, disgust, guilt, loneliness. He ticked each one off on his fingers before locking eyes with Coulson for the final one. And fear. And stronger cursed spirits will be born from the collective terror humanity feels when they realize these monsters are actually real, that the monster under their bed might truly be there. Coulson looked toward Lady Sif for confirmation. It is true, she affirmed solemnly. You ready? Ethan asked Sif, turning his back on the team and walking toward the tarmac, and Ethan looked over his shoulder as he added the last part, looking at their icers. And if you want more information, you better come at me with bigger guns, haha. Only under the binding vow of revealing one's hand will he provide further information regarding the intricacies of his technique, and as of yet, no opponent has possessed the strength to force him into making such a vow. Ward looked down at the bouncing ball Ethan had left behind on the table. He reached out to toss it aside, but the ball didn't budge. He tried again, putting his full weight into the effort, but it wouldn't even nudge. He looked over at Fitz, who simply raised both hands in silent, scientific bewilderment. Coulson and May followed Ethan outside. Tora moved forward and conjured a massive sling ring portal inside the moving bus, an impressive feat that few sorcerers could claim, maintaining a stable portal while traveling at high speeds, as well as maintaining the pressure differential so the bus won't implode on itself. Fitz saw the sling ring portal from the interior and rushed out, eyes wide. No. That's a localized Einstein-Rosen bridge. How is this even possible? Simmons appeared at his side, still wearing her transparent safety glasses. Is this more of sorcery? She asked, her voice sounding utterly defeated by the lack of scientific logic. Now, normally the bus should implode on itself to stabilize the pressure differential created by the sling ring portal, and that's where the most sorcerer fail. They can't create a stable portway where both sides have their respective pressure without interaction. Only the Ancient One, Wong, Catch Ellis, and now Tora could perform such feat. The portal opened directly onto the dusty lot of Rosie's desert oasis. The scene was a stark contrast to the high-tech interior of the bus. The air was thick with the scent of dry sagebrush and exhaust, shimmering under the relentless Nevada sun. Laurelai's tastes usually run toward palaces and castles, Lady Sif noted, unsheathing her sword with a lethal grace. This is far more humble than her usual abode. The draw wasn't the place, it was the manpower, Ward added, his gaze fixed on the rows of motorcycles parked outside. Chapter 63, Confrontation, Part 2. Inside the bar. What is that? Laurelai commented, her voice unbothered as the sound of gunfire erupted from outside. It seemed the police officers she had under her control had engaged Coulson's team. Well, we seem to have caught the attention of the law, replied Daniel, the leader of the biker gang. You swore to fight for me, Laurelai reminded him. Yeah, and I will, but they've got a lot of firepower out there. I mean, hell, they've even got some medieval chick. She has a sword and everything, Daniel countered. The color drained from Lorelai's face as she muttered, Sif. Moments later, Sif burst through the front door. Laurelai. Still manipulating men to do your dirty work, I see, Sif spoke, stepping into the center of the bar as Lorelai's men surrounded her. And I see you are still a step or two behind, Laurelai remarked. You know how this ends, Laurelai. Come in willingly, Sif added. You mistake me for someone who fears you. I have bested you before, or have you forgotten? Laurelai asked with a smug smile. Tear her apart. At her command, the men nearest to Sif discharged their shotguns. The blast only caused her to flinch back a single step. Sif began backhanding men through the walls and others through the doors. One even received the ceiling treatment. Seeing her men dismantled one by one, Laurelai made her retreat through the back door. Agent Grant Ward could be seen mapping out the rear of the bar when Daniel suddenly attacked him from behind with a heavy metal chain. Ward ducked the initial strike but lost his ICR in the process. I'm sure you're a very reasonable guy, he muttered. He ducked the next incoming attack and punched Daniel square in the face. Rooster? A rooster, really? Ward mocked, referencing the Dogs of Hell MC logo. Daniel went for the stomach, Ward ducked and delivered a punch in his chest, then one more on his face. Daniel was strong, but Ward was an agent with years of specialized training and experience. Within the next few exchanges, Ward successfully knocked him unconscious. As Ward was in the process of retrieving his ICR, Laurelai descended gracefully from the roof above. Ward spun around instantly, his weapon trained directly on her heart. You are a fine warrior, she remarked, her voice dripping with silk. I am, Ward replied, his grip tightening on the pistol. So put your hands behind your back and get on your knees right now. Men kneel before me, Laurelai countered, closing the distance as she approached Ward. I do not bow to them. I need some backup over here. Ward managed to grate out, though he seemed to be visibly struggling just to form the words. That is not what you need, Laurelai reaffirmed, her fingers brushing against his hand. Agent Grant Ward fell instantly under Laurelai's command. His gaze went vacant as he echoed her. Yes. That's not what I need. Just as the pair were about to make their escape, Ethan strolled into the area. With his left hand he was dragging a man in a white shirt by the back of his collar, trailing him like luggage. Even though Ward was facing Laurelai and Ethan was approaching from the opposite side, the agent's eyes widened from pure instinct. But before he could properly turn, Ethan was already beside him, delivering a simple backflick with his right hand. Agent Grant Ward flew backward, landing with a heavy thud against the opposite wall before sliding down, completely unconscious. Ethan looked at the unconscious Ward. Tora, Ethan spoke through their mental link. I'm on it, Tora replied, then he turned towards Laurelai. So you are Laurelai, huh? Ethan spoke, his eyes devoid of emotion. Tell me, did you kill this guy? He had found the body near the white sedan. A quick look told him the man had died from his rib cage caving in, pure, blunt force trauma. Laurelai seemed startled by his sudden arrival, but she quickly composed herself and followed his gesture. Ah yes. Poor Timmy, or was it Jimmy? I don't really remember. Ew, but I do remember his wife. A lovely girl, really. But alas, he chose to serve me, his true love. Is that so? Ethan asked, stepping closer. Oh yes, and you will serve me too, won't you? Laurelai asked, bringing her hand up to rest against Ethan's chest. Ethan and Laurelai locked eyes until he finally let go of Jimmy's remains. He brought his left hand up, interlacing his fingers with Laurelai's as they rested on his chest. Clunk, the wheel in Ethan's shadow spun once. Questioning you was my fault, Ethan said, his voice dropping an octave. I forget sometimes that people like you are simply a curse. Then he applied pressure. Crack. 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 Ah! Let go. Let go, you brute. Laurelai shrieked, raining punches down on Ethan. He simply tanked the pillow punches with a smile on his face. Finally, Ethan let go of her fingers, but only to grab her wrist and jerk her closer. She saw his punch coming a split second before her entire scene shifted. The scorching desert heat was replaced by the soothing, cool breeze of spring. Laurelai's eyes widened as she recognized a familiar feline. Vidar? Is that you, Vidar? She whispered. Since she was a little girl, Laurelai had been chastised by her peers for her unnatural ability to bend the minds of men. Her father had always looked at her with a mixture of fear and disgust, while her mother simply stood silently beside him. Vidar was my one and only friend, the only being who interacted with me without that lingering dread, she remembered. A younger Laurelai, in her teenage years, could be seen playing with Vidar in an open field, throwing a frisbee for him to retrieve. He would tackle her, licking her face as she would laugh. Has it been 600 years already? The younger Laurelai spoke, a tear welling in her. I see what's happening, she realized. This is my life flashing before my eyes. The scene snapped back to the rear exit of Rosie's desert oasis. Ethan was visible, pulling Laurelai into his reach and delivering a brutal punch to her face that shattered several of her teeth. He twisted her arms with precision before landing another strike to her jaw, causing her to spit a mixture of saliva and blood. Just as she was about to collapse, he caught her hands, yanking her back toward him to deliver a sharp CE-reinforced chop to the side of her neck. She hovered in the air for a few agonizing seconds until Ethan seized her leg and slammed her down. In the same motion, he delivered a devastating back kick to her throat, specifically targeting the larynx. He looked down at her as she struggled to draw breath. He had restrained himself just enough to avoid delivering immediately fatal damage. He leaned in and asked, "You must have felt powerful, taking over the minds of these men. How do you feel now, Laurelai?" Laurelai couldn't form words. With her eyes bloodshot and panicked, she managed only a desperate, trembling shake of her head. Ethan smiled as he brought his hand, now glowing with the pale light of reverse cursed technique, to her throat. He healed her voice box imperfectly, ensuring that even if the Asgardians tried to mend the rest of her body, they would never be able to restore her larynx. Laurelai, the grand sorceress who had brought down empires and kings alike with her voice, would never speak again. Just then May and Coulson arrived from the far side of the lot, while Lady Sif emerged from the back door. Ethan stood up as Tora began to dissolve in his shadow. "I have completed the memory suppression, Ethan," Tora spoke through. "Their link. Every memory of John Garrett and anything related to Hydra has been sealed within Ward's mind. I have implanted additional, fabricated memories to fill the gaps too." In Ethan's mind he recalled what Grant Ward could become if given a proper chance, much like in the framework simulation created by the rogue AI Ida, where he turned out to be a genuinely good man. Garrett, a high-ranking Hydra agent, had identified Ward as a broken, impressionable teenager and meticulously groomed him to be a loyal weapon. Manipulating his desperate desire for family and belonging, Ward had been systematically abused by his parents and his older brother, Christian. Garrett exploited this trauma, offering structure and a twisted form of love to a boy who felt entirely alone. He had even forced Ward to kill his own dog, Buddy, to destroy his capacity for emotional attachment, a key step in turning him into an obedient specialist. Ward was fundamentally a man looking for a mentor, not necessarily a monster. Maybe, just maybe, he will find that mentor in Coulson. His loyalty had always been intensely personal to Garrett, rather than to the Hydra cause itself. May immediately rushed toward where Grant Ward lay unconscious. Meanwhile, Coulson eyed Tora's massive spectral form with a mixture of awe and caution as he made his way toward Ethan. "Is that the tiger you were talking about?" Coulson asked, side-eyeing Lady Sif for confirmation and receive a nod. "Her spell, it had no effect on you?" Sif questioned. She seemed increasingly preoccupied with the bloody, broken state of Laurelai. Just then, Ethan's other phone rang. Tora retrieved it from a mirror dimension seal and handed it over. It was a text from Wong, unregistered cursed spirit signature spotted in Fairview, Connecticut. "Your ETA." "Of course it didn't work." "This is my cue, Coulson," Ethan replied, gesturing toward the phone. As he spoke, the massive wings of Nu materialized from his back, and he took to the sky. Coulson and May stood on the dusty ground, shielding their eyes as they looked up at the enormous wingspan. "What happened to Ward?" May shouted over the rising wind. "Don't worry, he'll be all right when he wakes up." "No, actually he'll be better than all right, he'll be Grant." "Haha." Ethan laughed at his own pun. "Damn, if this sorcerer gig doesn't work out, I have a future as a comedian." "No. No you don't," Ethan Tora shared. "Ha." Ethan spoke out loud. Coulson clearly wanted to ask more, but he shook his head and interrupted. "So long, losers." With that, Ethan vanished in a distant skyline, reaching his top speed, leaving a trail of thunderous sonic booms in his wake. Chapter 64, Ignore It. January 2nd, 2014, Fairview, Connecticut. Justin sat on his bed, eyes fixed on his Nintendo, when his bedroom door swung open. His father hurried in and sat beside him. "Justin," his father said, his voice a frantic whisper. "I want you to listen very carefully." He took a heavy breath. "She is back." "What?" Justin wanted to ask why, but his father pressed on. "Remember the rules. You must ignore her as much as possible, all right? Just like last time. Don't look at her. Don't even think about her." Fear flooded Justin's face. His father gripped his shoulder, trying to offer reassurance. "I promise she's going to leave, but only if you pretend she isn't there. Promise me." Okay, Justin mumbled. His father stood and moved to the door. "Let's join your mom and Emily downstairs for dinner." He looked over his shoulder one last time. "Stay focused." As Justin took his first step onto the landing, a sharp creak echoed from the adjacent room. He didn't turn. He took a deep breath and continued downstairs. The rest of the house was shrouded in darkness, only the lamp over the dining table was lit. His father pulled out a chair and Justin sat next to Emily. They exchanged a look of pure dread before staring at their plates. "Go ahead, eat your food," his mother said. Then they all heard it, heavy, deliberate footsteps coming from upstairs. "So, Emily, how did your algebra test go today?" his father asked, his voice strained. "I think I passed," Emily whispered. "I don't know." "That's good, Em." "That's good," his father replied. "Hon, dinner is great." "Thank you," his mother answered. Justin couldn't take the suffocating silence. "Dad, I don't understand. What's going on?" "Quiet, Justin," his father said, lips pressed thin. "Pass me the salt." Why is she back? Justin demanded. I said quiet, his father shouted, slamming his hand onto the table. They felt it before they heard it. The atmosphere grew ice-cold and heavy. Then came the footsteps, closer now. Justin's hands shook as he reached for his fork. Just ignore her, it's the only way, his father muttered as the treading became more defined. Just ignore it, Justin. He couldn't. He lifted his spoon to eye level, catching a glimpse of the woman's reflection in the metal. He slammed it down immediately. Beside him, Emily began to hyperventilate as a hand reached from the shadows behind her, gray, sickly, with long, filthy nails, and clamped onto her shoulder. Dad? Emily sobbed. His father shook his head in terror. It's okay, honey. Just finish everything on your plate. Emily reached for her fork, but the grip on her shoulder tightened. She forced herself to keep eating. We can't keep doing this, his mother mumbled. Can't keep doing this. Shrill. Shrill, the ring of the landline shattered the stupor. After the third ring, his mother stood. I'll get it. Just let it ring, his father pleaded. I'll get it. She walked toward the next room. Eat, his father whispered frantically to Emily. The hand vanished from Emily's shoulder, but the entity began walking toward the kitchen. Leave us alone, his mother's voice screamed from the other room. Han, his father called out. Leave my family alone. Han? Come back inside. Crack. Crack, his father rushed out and Justin followed, leaving Emily frozen in her seat. The bathroom door slammed shut with his mother inside. His father began kicking and pounding on the wood. Choking noises drifted from behind the door. No. No. Leave her alone, his father screamed. Then an inhuman sound erupted. It seemed to be coming from his mother's throat. Ustin stood paralyzed. His father turned to him, eyes wide. Justin, get back inside. Suddenly, a sharp, distinct crack echoed. His mother's voice stopped instantly. Beep, beep, beep. The landline continued its off-hook drone. Suddenly, the bathroom door burst outward with the force of an explosion. His father was thrown against the back wall and slumped down, motionless. Footsteps approached the doorway. A hand, black as night, gripped the doorframe. Before Justin could see more, Emily appeared behind him and spun him around. Just ignore it, she sobbed, her eyes fixed over his shoulder. Just ignore it. Just ignore it. He looked into her eyes and saw the reflection of the woman standing right behind him through her glasses. Emily tried to speak the words, but her eyes wouldn't stop following the figure. Emily couldn't ignore it. Similar occurrences were happening across Fairview. Returning from a rental studio after work, Juliana was reading an online article about people finding workplace doppelgangers, and how it had left them completely freaked out. She smiled at the thought. What are the chances I'll find a doppelganger someday? Her apartment was within walking distance of the office. As she rounded a corner and looked ahead, she saw it. Her dotted doppelganger of herself was standing silently beside a parked car. She looked around to see if anyone else was there, but when she glanced back, the double was gone. Spooked, Juliana hurried her pace until she reached her home, apartment 1506. She closed the door behind her and went up to her room to prepare her blog post for the day. She was typing away on her laptop when, thud, a heavy sound echoed from downstairs. She made her way down the stairs and found the main door standing wide open. Anxious, she hurried to close it. As she looked around the darkened room and turned to head back up to her bedroom, Juliana paused. She looked up and stared for several seconds, unable to believe what she was seeing. From the top of the stairs, a human head, no, not just any head but her own, was peeking out with a creepy smile. She stumbled back, flicked off the hallway lights, and covered her eyes with her hands. The last sound she heard was footsteps of the entity coming downstairs towards her to another house, only 2 blocks away. Thompson Sewell was an aspiring artist, currently immersed in a painting of the flower bouquets his girlfriend had brought him this morning. Her birthday was approaching, and he imagined surprising her with this completed canvas. As he meticulously worked on the blue petals of a single flower, Sewell leaned back in his chair and rubbed his eyes. He had been at it for 6 consecutive hours, and the fatigue was starting to show. However, as he opened his eyes, he flinched back in shock. The painting he had been working on was gone, replaced by another object wrapped in thick paper with a crumpled tag attached to it. Sewell glanced behind him. The room opposite his workspace was swallowed in shadow. He felt a jarring mixture of mild terror and dark intrigue. He turned back, the corner of his mouth curving into a distorted smile. Ha 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 ha. Producing a sharp palette knife, he sliced open the wrapped artwork. The tag bore only 2 words, "Look closer." In one fluid motion, he unveiled the canvas and began to analyze the piece. Ah, the central focus is a menacing, skull-like face in a tailored suit, he thought. Those features, dark, hollowed sockets and a wide, needle-toothed grin. Hee. The background is a void black abyss, amplified by the skull being positioned on the far left, leaving the right completely empty. And those teeth, they look so real. He heard it before he saw it, a rhythmic thumping like a heartbeat emanating from the canvas. Intrigued, he pulled the painting forward and turned it around to examine the back. Nothing. Only a blank white surface. Yet the heartbeat persisted. Kashja, the vase he had been painting shattered, the ceramic shards littering the floor. The flowers, vibrant moments ago, withered instantly, losing their luster. The heartbeat grew louder. He flipped the painting back and laid it on the table, remembering the tag's instructions. "Look closer." He leaned in until his face was inches from the black void. As he neared the canvas, the heartbeat abruptly stopped. His eyes drifted to the left. The skull face was gone. The area where it had been was now coated in a thick, wet substance. He touched it with his fingertips to confirm. This isn't paint, he realized, the metallic scent of blood filling his nostrils. His focus shifted to where he had smeared the liquid. Something was written beneath the gore, partially obscured. He gulped, frantically scratching away the drying blood to reveal the message. He froze as the words became clear. "Behind you." Crack! Crack! The floorboards in the room behind him shrieked, the sound stilling his breath. He turned with agonizing slowness. Standing in the doorway was the entity, the same skull-faced figure in the tailored suit. It stood motionless, its ear-to-ear grin mirroring the painting. Sewell was beyond terrified, his eyes bulged from their sockets as the sheer horror took hold. Then came the footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and closing in. Thud, 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 thud. He snatched up the palette knife. Just as the entity reached his back, he lunged forward with his eyes squeezed shut, stabbing the blade into the black canvas with every ounce of strength he possessed as he waited, trembling, before opening his eyes and releasing a jagged breath. The knife had vanished. The bouquet he had been painting at the start of the night was back on the canvas. Sewell looked behind him, the room was empty. He looked to the side, the flower vase was back in its original position, pristine as if nothing had happened. Hoo-hoo. Ha-ha. He laughed breathlessly. I've been working too hard, he thought, reaching out to remove the canvas and finish for the night. In that instant, a hand reached out from behind the canvas itself. The entity's fingers tore cleanly through his neck. Thud. The sound of Thompson Sewell's head hitting the floor echoed through the room. A second later, his body, his head, and his original painting vanished. In their place sat a new work of art. The painting depicted 2 figures, one positioned above the other. Both possessed unsettling, clown-like faces with wide white eyes staring directly at the observer. Exaggerated, toothy smiles seemed to physically grow out of the canvas. The upper figure wore a dark suit and a light blue tie, its eyes piercing and clear. The lower figure wore a light-colored buttoned shirt, identical to the one Sewell had been wearing, but its eye sockets were nothing but hollow black pits. These were only a few among the many strange occurrences manifesting across Fairview. On New Year's Eve, Ben and Rachel were contacted by their estranged friend Sean, Rachel's ex-boyfriend, who arrived bearing a mysterious gift, a black box. However, the situation quickly escalated when they pried the lid open, only to realize that something malevolent was desperately trying to claw its way out from the other side of the container. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of town in a cozy wooden cabin, Mona could be seen texting her roommate Jess. Mona, a typical college student, was obsessed with pretty things and aesthetic perfection. What she failed to realize, however, was that a terrifying entity defined by a creepy, smiling face, also fond of pretty things, was destined to pay them a visit that very same night. Chapter 65, The Columbia Incident. The Library of Camartage. Lucy Chun. She had become a member of the Order of the Masters of the Mystic Arts only last month, but despite her short tenure, she had already been left in awe of what she had witnessed. It wasn't just the magic performed by the masters or the ancient tomes left behind by the scholars. She had also seen him, Ethan Park, an Avenger, this Christmas. Earlier that day, Lucy had been diligently studying when a sling ring portal sparked into existence in the center of the room. She was alarmed. Opening portals inside the library was strictly prohibited. Initially, she feared someone was taking advantage of the absence of Master Kivas, the head librarian, and his right-hand Master Wong. But it wasn't a thief who stepped through. Instead, Ethan Park emerged carrying a shopping bag from Grandma Dumpling. He scanned the room as if searching for someone specific. She was still far too dazed to speak. Was he an apprentice too? Or was he already a master? Up close, she realized he was so handsome it was ridiculous. She involuntarily giggled. "You there?" Ethan called out, seemed to have heard her giggling. "Ah? Yes." Lucy scrambled to her feet. You are Ethan Park, an Avenger. Are you new here?" Ethan asked. "Yes, sir. I joined the Order of Masters of Mystic Arts only last month." Lucy Chen," she replied with conviction. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Well, Lucy, have you seen Wong?" "Wong is out in the city with Master Kivas," she replied immediately. "Is he? Well, tell him I dropped this off." Ethan handed her the bag. "And that I'm sorry for missing our training session." A brief silence followed as Ethan waited for her affirmation. "Of course, I'll make sure he receives it, sir, but can I ask for a selfie? Please? No one will believe me otherwise." Lucy finally mustered the courage as she flashed him her endearing smile. Ethan grimaced, seemingly having an internal debate, before he softened. "Why not?" Later that day, he sat amidst the towering shelves, eating microwave dumpling. Though not yet head librarian, he was the vital assistant to Master Kivas, knowing the location of every tome in these hallowed walls. 2 decades. That was how long he had been at Kamartaj. He had been a lost soul upon arrival, clouded by the grief of losing his baby sister. The Ancient One had taken him in, teaching him the mystic arts and helping him integrate his martial arts into a unique style. "So where was I again?" he asked Chin. She was a diligent girl from what Wong had seen this past month. "You were telling me about a sorcerer's way of life, Master Wong." "Yes, our way of life." Wong's thoughts drifted to the preceding years. An alien invasion and the grim aftermath. "Lucy, a sorcerer faces the threat of death every time they accept a commission. Every time they step through a gateway, there is a real chance they won't return," Wong spoke gravely. Before the Columbia incident, holding funerals every other month was not unusual. Lucy listened quietly, maintaining eye contact, though she visibly gulped at the mention of death. Many seasoned sorcerers simply chose to leave after their first encounter with a Grade 1 cursed spirit, and there is no shame in that, Wong continued. "Those who leave, we call them the smart ones, for only a madman goes out of his way to hunt such entities. To be a jujitsu sorcerer, one must be a little mad." Lucy had heard the saying. "I'm sorry, Master Wong. I am ignorant on the subject, but what was the Columbia incident?" Lucy asked hesitantly. "And how is Park connected? Is he a master too?" She had heard about Columbia incident in passing. Interested, she had asked Master Kivas, but all she had received in return was a firm dismissal, and as there were no written records for students to read, she was not privy to the knowledge. Wong paused to eat the last dumpling, then continued. "The Columbia incident is the day Ethan Park became a pillar of sorcerer society." As he finished, the plate disappeared, replaced by a white towel. "So he is a master," Lucy thought. Could his healing be replicated by the mystic arts? She was about to ask when Wong added, "And no, Park is not a master of the mystic arts, not in a traditional sense." "He isn't?" Her face fell. From the corner of her eye she saw more apprentices gathering to listen. Wong motioned for them to come forward, and her impromptu lesson shifted into a lecture. The Columbia incident was a disaster of an unprecedented scale, an outbreak where numerous Grade 1 spirits formed a pack. It's an extremely rare occurrence, as powerful spirits usually prefer isolation, to work alone. Wong explained. They were hunting humans across the Caribbean. Our reconnaissance team noticed an alarming number of civilians missing in the area. Normally, an operation of that scale would require weeks of preparation to minimize casualties, Wong continued as more students took seats around the table. At the time, I didn't understand why the Sorcerer Supreme insisted only a small team of elders and Ethan come along with her. Wong's expression shifted, as if recalling something painful. It was winter at the time. Ethan and the team were on the left side of one of the islands where we detected the signatures. We were ambushed, and the next second, my left arm was severed clean and we were surrounded on all sides by Grade 1s. Wong touched his left hand, presumably where the reattachment had occurred. All hell broke loose. The elders tried to hold them off, but we were taken out one by one. We hid behind a large hill rock. I was still bleeding when I noticed Ethan was not with us, and all of us were too injured to go back. We left him behind. Wong finished. We could still hear the fighting, with only Ethan remaining against God knows how many. Then there was silence. The team thought, that's it, Park's dead and we are next. The tension in the library was thick enough to cut with a knife when Lucy saw Master Kiva's walk in the front door. Wong continued, the next sound we hear was cackling laughter. The team limped outside, clutching their wounds, and you know what they see. He looked towards the approaching master and gave him a firm nod. Ethan Park standing there, laughing, with every grade 1 cursed spirit dead at his feet. He continued. Master Kivas approached the group, and Wong made to stand up to give him his seat. Kivas motioned for him to remain seated as he looked around the new group of apprentices and spoke. That was our introduction to him. That's why no masters talk about the Columbia incident. No one wants to relive that day. Kivas finished as he looked towards Lucy. She physical flinched. The master she had asked previously was Kivas himself. Though as a question popped into her head, she wore a look of intense curiosity. So, who is stronger? Ethan Park or the Ancient One? Murmurs started among the students at the posed question, but before an answer could be formed, a bell began tolling sharply across Kamartaj. A moment later, Master Mordo strode into the library, his expression unusually grim. Master Kivas, Master Wong, our reconnaissance team has picked up several signatures. Special grade cursed spirits are attacking Fairview, Connecticut, Mordo announced. He paused, his voice dropping an octave. A family of 4 was attacked, a college student was found beheaded in his apartment. More reports are coming in as we speak. Where is the Ancient One? Master Kivas asked urgently. Off-world, she is currently engaged. Mordo replied. We are receiving live transmission, Mordo announced. The sound of police sirens could be heard from the radio, then came the broken static voice. Fairview is being attacked by special grade cursed spirits. We need backup. Anybody there? Please respond. The sound of sirens in the background grew with each passing seconds. What's the situation right now? Mordo asked. The radio hummed with static. There was no reply for a whole minute. Students and teachers alike shared worried glances. Then finally came a grim transmission from the radio. All the grade 1 and lower grade sorcerers are down. They all turned toward Wong, who was already focused on his phone, thumbs flying across the screen. Special grade incoming, Wong stated firmly. Lucy realized she had been holding her breath and finally let it out in a long, shaky exhale. She turned back to Master Mordo. Were there any survivors? She knew it was a foolish question. She held out hope. A boy, Mordo replied quietly, and she smiled. It seems the cursed spirit intentionally left him alive after slaughtering his family right in front of him. We have yet to find anyone else who survived an encounter. The masters began to move with practiced urgency. Lucy sat still for a full minute after the other apprentices had cleared the room, lost in contemplation. She wasn't a sorcerer yet, she couldn't contribute to exorcising the spirit, but as a look of fierce determination crossed her face, she scrambled to her feet and sprinted down the long corridor toward Master Wong's private quarters. No, Wong said, cutting her off before she could even open her mouth. He didn't even need to look up to know why she was there. You are not going. Sir, with all due respect, you may know infinitely more about sorcery than I do, but I know that child. I was that child, she countered, her voice shaky but ringing with conviction. Right now, he doesn't need police officers telling him he's lost his mind. He needs someone to tell him. Tell him that we are going to get the bastard who did this. She spoke at length, but Wong does not look convinced. Please, Wong, she added. Wong looked at her, searching her eyes for a long moment before finally shaking his head in a silent surrender. Fine. But you do not leave my sight, not for even 1 second. Chapter 66, The Last Trip and Terror. Summer of 2013, Lucy Chen. This was a bad idea. She sat in the back seat of her parents' Toyota as they traversed the countryside. Both of her parents were doctors in the field of psychotherapy, which made their family dynamic particularly exhausting. Her mother and she had always had their differences. Her mother wanted her to become a doctor, or at least pursue a career within the traditional academic sphere. Her father was supportive of her actual career choices in private. But he invariably caved to her mother's pressure and never firmly stood his ground for Lucy's sake. This camping retreat had been their idea, a way to bridge the gap with a daughter who had been estranged. Despite the years of estrangement, one thing remained clear: they all loved each other. It wasn't the kind of love that needed to be declared or proven, it was simply a constant. That is what parental love is, in most cases, unconditional. They had camped out at Malibu Creek State Park, though they avoided the usual trails where campers typically parked. Lucy and her father set up a temporary shelter, a blue tent, while her mother organized the equipment for their hike up the hillside to find a prime spot for stargazing. Later that same day, her father took them to a nearby lake where they enjoyed fishing. Lucy was actually the one who caught the first fish of the evening. For a brief moment, it was as if the estrangement had never existed, with all of them laughing as they turned catching the most fish into a heated competition. Then came the night. After a hearty dinner of fish and homemade chips, they trekked up the trail to stargaze. Her father spotted the Big Dipper and she found Cassiopeia, all while her mother roasted marshmallows for them. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't such a bad idea after all, Lucy thought. "Lucy, we are just disappointed that you would waste your potential like that," her mother said, instantly ruining the moment. "You used to get such good grades in high school, why waste all that in a field with no scope? You just had to ruin it, didn't you, Mom?" Her father merely sighed at her outburst, as if it were her fault for questioning her mother's timing. That was the final nail in the coffin. Lucy stormed off, leaving them behind on the trail. Later, Lucy lay tucked inside her sleeping bag back in the tent. "We'll go boating tomorrow, sweetie," her father spoke softly from across the small space. He knew it was her favorite camping activity. "I love you, Dad and Mom," she wished she could have said. Instead, still sour from the argument on the hill, she muttered, "Whatever. I'll be free of this hell tomorrow." Later that night, "I shouldn't have drunk all that cola," Lucy thought as she tossed and turned, trying to suppress the urge to relieve herself. Finally, she sat up. She moved to peek outside the tent, but it was absolute darkness. She wanted to ask one of them to go with her, but her ego wouldn't allow it. She picked up the manual crank camping lantern and made her way outside. She heard a creaking to the left of their tent. Wild animals? She wondered. There shouldn't be any bears or wolves this far up the trail. Maybe coyotes? 5 minutes later, with the call of nature answered, Lucy was making her way back when she heard a rustling from the side of the tent. Chewing noises? Was a coyote trying to break in? She became immediately alert. There was a metal stake where her father had lit the campfire. She gripped a metal tent stake from the ground and crept forward. There she saw it, a trail of blood, thud, thud, thud. She could hear her own heartbeat hammering in her ears as she followed the trail to the other side, where the tent flap hung wide open. Her parents lay inside, her father slumped over her mother, their bodies twisted at impossible angles. There was a hollow cavity where their abdomens should have been, as if something had feasted on them. Lucy collapsed, the lamp falling beside her. "Ah-h-h-h-h-h," she screamed in a sudden, jagged burst. "This can't be happening, this can't be happening." The thought looped in her mind as images of them fishing and stargazing together flashed behind her eyes. Soon, the lamp's battery began to fail, the light flickering rhythmically. Lucy lunged for it, rotating the crank with all her strength to keep the darkness at bay. Then she heard it again, a screech to the left. She swung the lamp toward the source of the noise. First, there was nothing but trees and rocks. Then, something peeked from behind the nearest trunk and stayed there, watching her. The first thing Lucy noticed was the creature's massive, hollow-eyed face, which seemed to fill the entirety of its frame. Its eyes were huge, perfect circles with pitch-black pupils, locking Lucy in a fixed, unblinking stare. It moved horizontally, a long, spindly leg extending outward as the rest of the body followed. Now she could see the entirety of it. Its head was disproportionately large, with multiple smaller, skull-like faces embedded into the sides of the main cranium. Lucy slowly stood up, clutching the lamp as her gaze drifted to its torso. The creature featured an exposed ribcage and a sunken chest. Its skin appeared leathery, stretched tightly over a skeletal frame. It looked just human enough to be recognizable, but its warped features made it look like a manifestation of pure, unbridled anxiety. She didn't know what took over her, but she stood up, still gripping that metal stake, and pointed it directly at the creature. You will die for that," she proclaimed, her own eyes unblinking as they locked onto the monstrosity. With a scream of defiance, she lunged toward the creature, bringing the metal stake down with all her strength. The last thing she saw before the world went black was the creature's bloodied, sickening smile as she closed the distance. That was all she remembered. She told this truth to everyone who would listen, but the police dismissed it as a tragic wild animal attack, a byproduct of trauma-induced hallucinations. Nobody believed her. Not until the day a man named Wang arrived at her parents' home specifically to meet her, it was there she learned the true nature of the thing that had slaughtered her family, a cursed spirit. She had been skeptical at first, naturally, but her doubts vanished the moment she saw Wang spark an orange portal into existence right in the middle of her living room. That was her introduction to Camartage, present-day. Fairview, Connecticut. Ethan Park. The atmosphere in the city had shifted, a red moon hung low and the streets were enveloped in a thick layer of snow. High above the skyline, Ethan stood at the edge of a railing, hands tucked into his pockets, observing the urban sprawl below. He thought, and his cursed energy trait instantly turned electrical. In this electrified state, his already sharp sensory perceptions took a monumental leap. Ethan focused with his eyes closed, spreading his senses throughout the city like a net. There you are, he realized, feeling the distinct presence of Wang and the other masters of Camartage. Ethan took a step forward and began free-falling from the tower. His hair flowed upward as he plummeted toward the ground, but mid-fall he flickered and vanished. This wasn't teleportation. In his electrical CET state, he was able to feel minute changes in temperature and atmospheric pressure. His senses became so sharp that he could perceive differences in air density across various points, effectively treating the air not as empty space, but as a map of solid, leverage-producing particles he could step on, kick against, or grab. This ability allowed him to perform feats such as a double jump or air walk. Currently heading towards Wang, Ethan's senses picked up unusual cursed energy signatures in different houses miles away. Though it's still too early to say, this doesn't feel like a planned attack. There is no coordination here. What the hell is happening in Fairview? Ethan thought with a furrowed brow. Lucy Chen. She stood with Wang in front of the street where a family of 4 had been attacked. Justin sat on the back of an ambulance, muttering about how Emily couldn't ignore the woman, and she had died because of it. The sound of sirens grew louder with each passing second. Lucy wanted to move closer to the boy, to comfort him, perhaps? But she knew she was kidding herself. Nothing she did could change the hollowed look Justin wore. He would have to live with that trauma for the rest of his life. Just ignore it, just ignore it, Justin repeated loudly enough for her to hear from across the street. She could see the boy was trembling in terror. Suddenly, the blaring sirens faded into silence. Lucy looked around to see what had happened, only to find the EMT attending to Justin frozen in place. She glanced back. Other civilians and police officers were in a similar state, frozen mid-movement. However, Justin was not. She watched him jump from the back of the ambulance and navigate through the frozen crowd. The scene was eerily silent, reminding her of the last trip she took with her parents. Without realizing it, she brought a hand to her chest. Her heart was pounding. Thud, thud, thud. Was this the work of a cursed spirit? Lucy wondered. She looked back and saw that Wang and the other masters were also unfrozen. Something is off. Why aren't they reacting to this? It is as if they are used to it. Total battlefield incapacitation, Wang spoke, giving her a side look as he walked beside her, his hand crossed and behind his back. It heralds his arrival. From across the street, Justin noticed the group of odd-looking people in robes of red and yellow. From the group, one member emerged, a woman, and began walking toward him. He gulped. They are not bad people, you can trust them, Justin heard his sister's voice whisper in his mind. They are going to keep you safe. He felt the tension drain from his body, his hands and legs finally stopped shaking. He could trust that voice, he told himself as he walked toward the woman. Lucy dropped to one knee to level herself with Justin. Come here, she said, pulling the boy into a much-needed hug. Then she heard it, footsteps, slow and deliberate. Ethan had arrived. Lucy and Justin looked up as Park passed by. His eyes were fixed ahead, his hair falling naturally over a grimacing face. His presence left her paralyzed for a moment. He is so different from Christmas morning, Lucy thought. When Ethan had handed her that bag on Christmas, he wasn't chatty, but he had worn a smile. The air around him hadn't felt this oppressive. Who is that? Justin asked as Ethan approached the company of masters, Kivas, Wang, Mordo, and Catch Ellis. Lucy turned to him with a reassuring smile. Don't worry. He's on our side. You may have seen him on the news, he is Ethan Park. Ethan Park. Kitsune's illusions have improved by a distinguishable margin after the eighth tail emerged, Ethan analyzed. Beside him, the reversal of the divine dogs, his eight-tailed Kitsune, made herself known, nuzzling his hand for attention. Ethan complied, scratching her under the chin. His Kitsune was a majestic fox Shikigami, a master of cerebral manipulation capable of ensnaring the minds of seasoned sorcerers and special-grade curses alike. In this scenario, Ethan had used her power to flash-freeze the crowd, allowing the sorcerers to work uninterrupted. The Kitsune had also influenced Justin, calming his mind and stilled his trembling. Wong approached from the side while the other masters began constructing a massive barrier around Fairview. "So she's the one you were talking about?" Ethan questioned, side-eyeing Wong as he petted the fox. He had heard about the incident that took Lucy's parents, but on that Christmas morning when he'd given her the dumplings for Wong, he hadn't realized she was the same girl. Wong didn't answer immediately, watching as Lucy talked with Justin before turning back. "Yes. I personally exorcised that grade 1 spirit before it could harm anyone else." "It's unfortunate," Wong added, looking back at Park. "What is?" Ethan asked as the Kitsune began dissolving into his shadow. "She has the guts to be a sorcerer, but no talent for the mystic arts," Wong clarified. "Is that so?" Ethan asked and received a nod of affirmation from Wong. "Well, we can't have them all." As if remembering a detail, he questioned, "Speaking of guts, is it true she went in for the kill with a metal stake?" Wong's lips curved upward and he nodded. "Damn," Ethan whistled. "Damn indeed," Wong agreed. "Back to the job, Kitsune can keep the population immobilized for half an hour without lasting effects," Ethan stated, his eyes narrowing as he added, "but a lot of civilians are already dead inside their homes. How are we going to deal with them?" Wong asked, his knuckles turning white as he clenched his fists, referring to the hordes of spirits attacking the people of Fairview. Ethan looked around, observing the scenery. A red moon hung in the sky and a white blanket of snow covered the city. The sirens had stopped, but the police lights still flickered, blue, red, blue, red. People stood frozen in mid-motion while the sorcerers erected a massive dome around Fairview. "It's not a them, Wong. It's one curse," Ethan finally spoke.